Kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Wednesday, the 25th of September. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood, live at the Labour Party conference, where a union-led vote has just, in a non-binding way, called on the government to ditch its planned cuts to winter fuel allowance. More as we get it.
Thank you very much indeed. And leave Lebanon now. The Prime Minister demands Brits evacuate immediately as the conflict in the Middle East escalates. And yet another Labour donation blunder. The Prime Minister accepted accommodation worth over £20,000 from, guess who? Lord Ali. Asked why, Starmer said it was to help his teenage son peacefully study for his GCSEs. Has he not heard of a library? And Met badge outrage. Metropolitan police officers have been banned from wearing a badge that commemorates hero cops killed in the line of duty. Why? And he's back. Philip Schofield is set to make an unexpected return to television 16 months after exiting ITV over his widely reported affair scandal. Well, Tom, you're at the Labour Party conference. It's the last day. Keir Starmer is no longer there, but people are voting against his policies.
Yes, it's a controversial move, Emily. This vote was originally meant to take place on Monday, when for convenient scheduling reasons, it was announced that there was simply not time to have this vote earlier on in the conference. A lot of unions cried foul play at that. Clearly, the idea from those that organised the conference is they didn't want this embarrassment to take place earlier, to take place on Monday ahead of the Prime Minister's speech. It's easier for the Labour Party to take this non-binding vote on the Wednesday when the Prime Minister has already jetted off to New York, when a lot of people have already left this conference. They left this until the last possible minute to hold this vote. Why? Well, it was inevitable. They lost it.
They can sweep it under the carpet, perhaps. We shall see if there's any impact to this vote. Non-binding, you say, but it could cause quite the stir. Thank you very much indeed, Tom Harwood. We'll catch up with you in a little bit. Please do get in touch at home. I want to get your thoughts on this winter fuel payment vote. Keir Starmer wasn't there to see it through. He had already disappeared off to the United States. Also, your view on this £20,000 of accommodation that Keir Starmer has taken as a freebie, apparently because his son needed to revise in a peaceful environment. Is that peaceful environment an £18 million penthouse in central London? Very odd indeed. But get your thoughts in gbnews.com/your say. Let's have the news headlines with Tatiana.
Emily, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories. A motion calling for Labour to reverse its cut to the winter fuel allowance has been backed by party conference members in a blow to Sir Keir Starmer.
Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel!
That was the Unite Union members chanting against it early this morning. And while there's nothing binding about the vote, it puts further pressure on Labour over its decision to take away the benefit from millions of pensioners. The motion was put forward by the Unite Union, which has accused the government of embarking on austerity Mark II. Whilst it's a step in the right direction, Unite Union's General Secretary Sharon Graham told GB News the vote should have happened sooner.
Well, look, I think this vote should have happened on Tuesday. I mean, the vote was down under the economy debate on Tuesday, and I think it is disrespectful to the issue that we weren't hearing that vote earlier on under the economy debate. Look, the reality here is that they're going to have to reverse this allowance in terms of putting it back into the pockets of pensioners, and we're asking them to do that. I disagree with what the Prime Minister is saying on this. I'm really glad we've got a Labour government. I think Britain is better off with a Labour government, but on this issue it is a huge misstep, and he needs to change what he has done. And I think the country out there, it's not really what happens in this hall that's important, it's what's happening there in the real world. They are furious about it.
The Health Secretary has told the Labour Party conference on its fourth and final day that the NHS is letting people down, as he also promised to defend it as a public service. Wes Streeting says we can only build recovery with reform, as he vowed to make the health service fairer.
I know the doctor's diagnosis can sometimes be hard to hear. But if you don't have an accurate diagnosis, you won't provide the correct prescription. And when you put protecting the reputation of the NHS above protecting patients, you're not helping the NHS, you're killing it with kindness. So I say respectfully, but unequivocally, I won't back down. The NHS is broken, but it's not beaten, and together we will turn it around.
In other news, the Prime Minister suggested he accepted £20,000 in donations for accommodation because his son needed somewhere to revise for his GCSEs while his family home was besieged by journalists during the election campaign. Sakir defended his decision to take gifts from Labour peer Lord Ali amid criticism, saying he was not going to apologise for not doing anything wrong. And he also said the freebies didn't cost the taxpayer a penny. But Sakir signalled he could continue to accept of judgment for individual MPs. He also said the transition to Downing Street had been really difficult for his two children, who were previously raised in North London. The Prime Minister's told Britons in Lebanon to leave immediately as around 700 UK troops are deployed to Cyprus to oversee an emergency evacuation. It says Sakir Starmer's in New York for the UN General Assembly. Warning sirens sounded in Tel Aviv this morning as a missile was intercepted by air defence systems after it was detected crossing from Lebanon, that coming from Israel's military. No injuries or casualties have been reported. Terror group Hezbollah has confirmed it launched a rocket targeting Mossad headquarters near Israel's capital. Hezbollah says the Mossad's responsible for assassinating leaders and blowing up pagers and walkie-talkies in Lebanon, a claim which has been denied by the Israeli president. Sakir Starmer says the government are ramping up the contingency plans in light of the escalation, with fears growing of all-out war between Israel and Hezbollah. More than 500 people, including women and children, have been killed in the past 24 hours. Sakir Starmer says Benjamin Netanyahu's criticism of the UK government's decision to suspend some arms export licences to Israel amid concerns they could be used in violation of international humanitarian law is wrong. The Prime Minister rejected his Israeli counterpart's accusation that the move had been misguided. He described Israel as a very important ally and said he'd long respected and supported its right to self-defence, but said Britain had to comply with international rules. The new Labour government has suspended about 30 out of a total of 350 arms export licences to Israel after a UK assessment suggested they could be used to breach international rules. The Police Memorial Trust has unveiled a specially commissioned memorial stone dedicated to the memory of Police Sergeant Matt Rutner of the Metropolitan Police Service. Sergeant Rutner, a New Zealand-born British police officer, was shot and killed in Croydon Custody Centre in London in 2020. The officer was nearing retirement, having served 30 years in the police. Louis de Soysa opened fire at the Croydon Custody Suite. De Soysa, who's autistic, had earlier been arrested and searched, but officers had failed to find the gun the 26-year-old had in an underarm holster despite discovering bullets in his pocket. Philip Schofield has announced he'll return to television 16 months after his departure from ITV's This Morning. The former TV star will appear on a Channel 5 special called Castaway. In a post on Instagram, he said, "Now you know how I spent my summer alone for 10 days. No food, no water, no crew." He then goes on to say, "My story of survival, both on a desert island and off it." The 62-year-old resigned from ITV last May after he admitted to an unwise but not illegal affair with a younger male colleague. And a new weather warning for heavy rain has been issued by the Met Office, which could cause further widespread flooding and travel disruption. The yellow warning's been issued for much of England and Wales, apart from North Wales, parts of the West Midlands and the north west of England, between 5 p.m. tomorrow and 10 a.m. on Friday. The Met Office says there's some uncertainty in the details of this warning, but some areas could see up to 30 millimetres of rain in 2 to 3 hours. It's in addition to the yellow rain warning, which was previously issued for tomorrow, lasting all day and covering much of the northeast of England. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 10 minutes past 12, and we'll start with that breaking news in the last few minutes. The Labour Party delegates have voted to reverse the proposed cuts to the winter fuel payment that would affect millions of pensioners. The result is non-binding, but will still come as a blow, perhaps a bit of a humiliation for Sir Keir Starmer, who's already been accused of losing control of his party just a few months after winning a landslide in July's general election. Well, let's go live to Liverpool now and speak to GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley, who's there for us. Olivia, this is quite a humiliating moment, I suppose, for the Prime Minister.
Well, it absolutely is. The conference began badly for Keir Starmer. There was an opinion poll out on the eve of the conference showing that his popularity rating is now lower than Rishi Sunak's, minus 26 points to Rishi Sunak's minus 25. And it has ended very badly indeed with this symbolic vote by Labour members to reverse the removal of winter fuel payments for 10 million pensioners. Two of the biggest unions, the CWU and Unite, teamed up together to make this vote happen. It's symbolic. It doesn't really matter in terms of policy. Keir Starmer can still go ahead with the cut, and it very much sounds as though he's going to. On a media round this morning, he refused 4 times to apologise to pensioners, and again, him and his cabinet are digging their heels in and saying this is necessary, unpopular action, but necessary action because of the mess that the Conservatives left Labour in. He talked again about that alleged £22 billion black hole. But as you say, Emily, it does begin to suggest that Keir Starmer is sort of losing control of his party, which is a bizarre thing to be saying just 2 months after such a big general election victory. I think the problem for Keir Starmer is that although Labour won with this enormous majority, Keir Starmer's own popularity ratings were never particularly high. Labour seemed to be popular partly because the Conservatives were so unpopular. And that means that Labour MPs and Labour members don't really feel a sense of gratitude to Keir Starmer himself. They don't feel as though he is responsible for their election victory. And that means that they don't have that much loyalty to him. And so something like this vote today was able to happen. It doesn't really mean anything concrete in the short term, but I think it is a bit of a blow for Keir Starmer's authority very, very early on in his premiership.
And Olivia, it does not look at all like Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are going to budge on this 1 centimetre. Keir Starmer on the media round refusing to apologise to pensioners who will be impacted by this. This policy is going nowhere.
This policy is going nowhere, absolutely. I mean, there has been so much pressure for weeks and weeks now on the Labour Party to reverse this decision, both from inside Parliament and, of course, from the unions, some of whom help fund the Labour Party. And Labour still hasn't moved. I think if it was going to move, it would have moved already. The only potential chance that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer change their minds over this is if this turns out to be a really, really cold winter. And already we know that Ofgem is increasing the price cap, the energy price cap. So people's bills will go up. If it turns into a really, really cold winter, that could be politically very difficult for the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. So perhaps we might see some movement in a few months' time. But for the time being, it very much seems, as you say, no apology at all, as though the Chancellor and the Prime Minister are going to stick to their guns on this.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Olivia Utley, our political correspondent outside the conference hall there in Liverpool. Now, this all comes against the backdrop of Sir Keir Starmer, who's embroiled in yet another freebie scandal. He's claimed he accepted £20,000 in donations towards accommodation. He says, Sir Keir Starmer says that he had to do this £18 million penthouse, courtesy of Lord Ali, so that his son could study for his GCSEs undisturbed in a peaceful environment. Let's take a listen.
Beginning of the election, which we didn't know when it was going to be called, my boy, 16, was in the middle of his GCSEs. I made him a promise that he would be able to get to his school, do his exams without being disturbed. We had lots of journalists outside our house where we lived. Now, I'm not complaining about that, that's fine. But if you're a 16-year-old trying to do your GCSEs, and it's your one chance in life, I promised him we would move someone, we'd get out of that house and go somewhere where he could be peacefully studying. Somebody then offered me accommodation where we could do that, and I took it up, and it was the right thing to do for my book.
Well, we can now discuss this further with GB News' Tom Harwood. Tom, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. This is quite extraordinary, actually. £20,000 luxury accommodation, courtesy of Lord Ali, of course, everyone's favourite Labour peer and donor, because his son needed to study in a peaceful environment.
Yes, it's strange, isn't it? When I did my GCSEs, I didn't necessarily need an £18 million luxury apartment complex in Covent Garden to do so. But clearly, Keir Starmer's 16-year-old son did. That's the view of the now Prime Minister. He says that there were too many journalists camped outside the house where he normally lives and needed to find alternative accommodation. That makes sense to some extent, of course. You would not want to be disturbed by hordes of journalists outside a house. The question mark, however, comes with regard to the scale of this accommodation, the cost of this accommodation. Could they really find no other place than an £18 million luxury apartment complex that was worth £20,000 for the period of time in which it was stayed? But also it's interesting to note that the stay wasn't just for the period of the GCSE exam timetable. It carried on for almost a month after GCSEs finished, which does raise a question mark over this explanation.
And Tom, as far as we know, the whole family were staying there in this luxury penthouse apartment. They put it down in their declaration as about £20,000 worth of accommodation. I mean, you say it's reasonable to look for another accommodation if journalists are disrupting. Has he not heard of a library?
Well, yes, you would have thought that there were many other options other than one of the most exclusive and expensive addresses in London, right at the heart of Covent Garden. I've seen some of the pictures inside this accommodation, and it is really quite lavish. Now, that is a question mark. Did this scale of luxury, was that particularly necessary? These will be questions that are asked of Keir Starmer. And this excuse about GCSEs, well, I mean, why then did the whole family need to stay there? Why did they need to stay there after the period of time at which GCSEs ended? And we're also hearing that this particular luxury penthouse was where Keir Starmer watched the election results as well. It seems it goes far deeper than the particular circumstances of Keir Starmer's son, so there are question marks being made over whether or not the particular issue of GCSE revision was really the reason behind the necessity of this £18 million penthouse accommodation.
Like it was just a luxury stay for the family that they were offered. But I think the difficulty here politically is, well, one of the issues is that it seems to be fine for Keir Starmer to pay for privilege for his son, but not OK for parents to pay with money that they've earned for their children to use the independent sector, the private sector, for their schooling.
That is an excellent point, Emily. Of course, there are many, many children who are doing their GCSEs and have been over the last couple of years who have far more disturbance at their family home, who have far fewer quiet places to stay, who share rooms or don't have study space or all the rest of it. It is a question mark in terms of why the Prime Minister needed an £18 million mansion, £20,000 worth of that for the time period in which it was stayed in at the heart of London, in Covent Garden. It is a question mark there as to why that was so necessary, especially at a time when Sir Keir Starmer is taking away the right of many people on more moderate incomes to send their children to the independent sector by increasing bills by 20% there. It also raises a question mark over whether or not Keir Starmer paid for his own fuel bills when there. Of course, at the Labour Party conference here, we've just had a motion passed condemning the government for their decision to remove winter fuel payments from pensioners, and it really does sort of show the comparison there, where the Prime Minister is not paying for his own accommodation, is likely not paying for his own fuel, and at the same time making this decision to withdraw this benefit from millions of pensioners.
Yes, it does sound as though he's happy to accept privilege if he doesn't have to pay for it, if he's not the person who earned the money to pay for it. Anyway, Tom, while I've got you, we are going to be catching up with Christopher Hope, who is in the United States with the Prime Minister. But, Tom, just tell us, what is Keir Starmer doing in New York?
Well, it's the UNGA annual event. That's the UN General Assembly. Keir Starmer will be making a speech at the United Nations headquarters in New York, meeting with many world leaders there. And it comes just as Labour Party conference, I must say, in the last 2 minutes has concluded. I've just been hearing in the background, Emily, the annual rendition of the People's Flag. The People's Flag is deepest red, it's shroud our martyrs dead. That was being sung, followed by Jerusalem. So there's been a nice little background. I'm not sure if you've been able to hear it, but while we've been talking, there's been this little serenading from just beyond the camera.
Oh, a nice little serenade of Jerusalem in the background. Lovely stuff. Thank you very much indeed, Tom. And thank you for covering the Labour Party conference so well for us on this show. We'll catch up with you later. Now, for more reaction, I am joined by GBNews senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Nigel, thank you very much indeed for joining me on the show. This £20,000 of accommodation from Lord Ali because his son needed somewhere peaceful to study. Nigel, can you justify that one for us?
Look, I appreciate, Emily, the optics on this are not terribly good on the basis...
They're not terribly good, they're terrible.
Especially after £100,000 worth of freebies that Keir Starmer previously took. So, I think that the justification is the one that the Prime Minister gave. I'm sure if Wahid Ali had a three-bed semi-spare, the Prime Minister and his son would have been quite happy to have used that.
Nigel, what evidence do you have to suggest that?
Well, what I'm saying is that if you're offered a place by a very rich person, which is worth £18 million, I'm just suggesting that maybe Wahid Ali didn't have that spare three-bed semi that they could have used instead.
Oh, come off it.
What I'm saying is that that was what was offered, that's what he took. Okay. Now, I'm not actually defending all this because I think that there is a real problem with the various things that Keir Starmer did take. However, we should make some distinctions here, that when it comes to hospitality, I'm not too bothered about that. The free football tickets, for instance, I don't think are a major problem. I do think that any MP, whoever they are, should avoid taking expensive gifts. And I think that was the bit, the clothes and the glasses were the real problem. And it's quite right that Keir Starmer should say, right, realise I made a bit of a mistake there. On the basis of that, I won't be taking any more.
But why should we even believe this weird justification that it was because his son needed somewhere peaceful to study in the run-up to his GCSEs? Because we can look at the detail of this donation that's been declared, this accommodation, and it lasted far longer than the period of the GCSEs.
Yes, I'm not defending what happened here, except that I do take into account Keir Starmer as a parent, his explanation for what he did. That obviously it's a slightly curious situation. It's not like the rest of us, that he's got journalists right outside his home. It is incredibly disruptive. I've been one of those journalists, so I know how disruptive it can be for families.
So it's okay for him. It's okay for him to take donations to improve the life of his child to privilege his child, but then parents who save up and work hard and try to earn and make the decision to send their children through the private school system are going to be taxed for that choice. Do you see how it smacks of hypocrisy? It's one rule for Keir Starmer when it comes to his children. They need the very best. He needs to study in peace in this £18 million penthouse. He couldn't possibly do that in a library like everyone else or at home in his own room. But then, you know, parents who are saving up and sending their children to private schools, they get hammered.
No, I take the point that there'll be kids all over the country who had to do their revision on the kitchen table, and they'll not be best pleased about seeing this. I think when we come to the VAT on private school fees, we're talking about something different here. What the danger of all this is, we're confusing what the various things Keir Starmer has done, and some of which he shouldn't have done, with government policy. Now, the point about the private school fees, the question here is it right that the taxpayer subsidises other people's choices? I think people should be able to spend their money exactly as they wish. However, I don't expect the taxpayer to subsidise that. That's why, if you're paying private school fees, you ought to pay full whack. There's no sign with school fees going up 55% in real terms.
It's interesting that you say not taxing something is akin to a subsidy. I would disagree with you fundamentally on that, but Nigel, we'll have to leave it there because we've come to the end of our allotted time. But thank you very much indeed, Nigel Nelson, GB News senior political commentator. Thank you very much. Right. Well, in other news, tensions continue to increase in the Middle East. Israel's Iron Dome has been forced to intercept missiles fired by Hezbollah. After thousands of pagers and walkie-talkies unexpectedly exploded in Lebanon, Israel launched its biggest offensive yet on the country. Now, thousands of British nationals in the area are being told to leave immediately. Well, joining us now is the Defence and Foreign Affairs editor at the Daily Telegraph, Con Coughlin. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Con Coughlin. Please, can you bring us up to date on the latest developments in that area of the world?
Well, good afternoon. It's a very fast-moving situation in Lebanon and the Middle East. First of all, you've got the escalation of the conflict between Israel and the Iranian-backed Hezbollah militia, which controls southern Lebanon. Hezbollah upped the ante overnight by firing its first ballistic missile at Tel Aviv, which in military terms is quite an escalation. The Israelis today have responded by continuing their aerial attacks against Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. Meanwhile, there are an estimated 10,000 British subjects in Lebanon who must be thinking whether they should stay or leave. The Foreign Office guidance is to go now. And Starmer and the British government are putting together an evacuation force in Cyprus. I've actually been evacuated from Lebanon in the past, and that's the tried and tested route to get out of Beirut to safety, and it takes about an hour. So hopefully that's all in place, depending on how this very dynamic situation unfolds.
And from your understanding, what is Israel's main goal here? To completely take out Hezbollah, all its operatives, all its military centres and the like?
Well, certainly what the Israelis want to do is stop Hezbollah attacking Israel. And this all started after the October the 7th attacks. Hezbollah is an ally of Hamas in Gaza in the south. And after Israel launched its retaliation against Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah, in support of Hamas, started firing at Israel. This has meant that an estimated 60,000 Israelis have been forced to flee their homes in northern Israel. This has been going on for nearly a year, as I said. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has declared that what he wants is to secure the border and get those Israelis back into their homes. That is basically the stated objective of the Israelis. But big questions remain about whether this is doable. Hezbollah is a very well-established presence in southern Lebanon. It's very well armed. It's got 60,000 fighters estimated at. So this is a big challenge. So the problem really for the Israelis is this doable? But at the moment, the main issue for the Israelis is to stop Hezbollah firing these missiles, and we'll have to see if that works.
And is Hezbollah stronger and more determined than some may have thought or predicted?
Well, it certainly seems the case. I mean, when I was in Beirut in the 80s, Hezbollah first appeared, and it was a very small organization. Today, it's got, as I said, between 50 and 60,000 fighters. It's got about 100,000 missiles. It's supported by Iran. Iran sends regular shipments of arms through Syria to southern Lebanon. So that I mean, basically, this is Iran's front line in its war against Israel. And the Iranians are watching this very closely and will be trying to support Hezbollah. So Hezbollah is a very formidable force. It's bigger and stronger than Hamas. So the Israelis have got a far more challenging task in confronting Hezbollah, in my view, than they've had dealing with Hamas.
Thank you very much indeed, Con Coughlin, Defence and Foreign Affairs Editor at the Daily Telegraph. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Yesterday in Keir Starmer's speech, he made a big promise for veterans that they'll be given priority housing. Is that right? After the news.
Emily, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories. A motion calling for Labour to reverse its cut to the winter fuel allowance has been backed by party conference members in a blow to Sir Keir Starmer.
Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel!
Now, while there's nothing binding about the vote, it puts further pressure on Labour over its decision to take away the benefit from millions of pensioners. The motion was put forward by the trade union Unite, which has accused the government of embarking on austerity Mark II. Whilst it's a step in the right direction, Unite Union's General Secretary Sharon Graham told GB News the vote should have happened sooner.
Well, look, I think this vote should have happened on Tuesday. I mean, the vote was down under the economy debate on Tuesday, and I think it is disrespectful to the issue that we weren't hearing that vote earlier on under the economy debate. Look, the reality here is that they're going to have to reverse this allowance in terms of putting it back into the pockets of pensioners, and we're asking them to do that. I disagree with what the Prime Minister is saying on this. I'm really glad we've got a Labour government. I think Britain is better off with a Labour government, but on this issue, it is a huge misstep, and he needs to change what he has done. And I think the country out there, it's not really what happens in this hall that's important, it's what's happening there in the real world. They are furious about it.
Well, in the last few moments, we have heard that Labour has reaffirmed its decision to cut the winter fuel payment after those party delegates voted for the government to reverse the move, and I'll have more on that in the next hour. The Health Secretary has told the Labour Party conference the NHS is letting people down, as he also promised to defend it as a public service. Wes Streeting says we can only build recovery with reform, as he vowed to make the health service fairer.
I know the doctor's diagnosis can sometimes be hard to hear. But if you don't have an accurate diagnosis, you won't provide the correct prescription. And when you put protecting the reputation of the NHS above protecting patients, you're not helping the NHS, you're killing it with kindness. So I say respectfully, but unequivocally, I won't back down. The NHS is broken, but it's not beaten, and together we will turn it around.
And the Prime Minister's told Britons in Lebanon to leave immediately, as around 700 UK troops are deployed to Cyprus to oversee an emergency evacuation. This is as Sir Keir Starmer's in New York for the UN General Assembly. Warning sirens sounded in Tel Aviv this morning as a missile was intercepted by air defence systems after it was detected crossing from Lebanon, that coming from Israel's military. No injuries or casualties have been reported. Terror group Hezbollah has confirmed it launched a rocket targeting Mossad headquarters near Israel's capital. Hezbollah says the Mossad's responsible for assassinating leaders and blowing up pagers and walkie-talkies in Lebanon, a claim which has been denied by the Israeli president. Sir Keir Starmer says the government are ramping up the contingency plans in light of the escalation, with fears growing of all-out war between Israel and Hezbollah. More than 500 people, including women and children, have been killed in the past 24 hours. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. It is now 12:34. Now, yesterday, the Prime Minister announced a bold new housing plan to ensure that veterans, young care leavers and domestic abuse victims are guaranteed a roof over their heads. Now, the initiative promised to end local residency rules for social housing, though critics warn that a lack of homes could undermine the pledge. OK, well, joining me now is GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster. Catherine, considering the number of veterans who are sadly living on our streets, who are without a home, who are sofa surfing and are living in temporary accommodation, this is a big promise.
Yes, indeed. Good afternoon, Emily. This new government is making a lot of pledges, making a lot of plans. A lot of them are very controversial. They're upsetting plenty of people with things like the cuts to the winter fuel allowance. But this announcement, I think, is one of the few that will have broad consensus and broad support. Sir Keir Starmer yesterday, in his first speech as Prime Minister to conference, saying that veterans and young care leavers and also domestic abuse victims would be prioritised for social housing. He says that there will be homes for heroes. Those were his words. So at the moment, often you have to prove a local connection to qualify, and a lot of veterans fall down on that. And as you've said, Emily, an awful lot of the people that tragically end up homeless on our streets are indeed veterans, men and women who have served this country very bravely, you know, taken the ultimate risk. And often they have terrible post-traumatic stress disorder, mental health issues, they turn to drink or whatever, and they find themselves ultimately on the streets. I think 80% of homeless veterans left the military 5 years ago or more, and that's the point at which you've got to prove a local connection. So this should make a difference, and it has been broadly welcomed. Help for Heroes, who of course support our veterans, say, however, that homelessness is rarely an issue that occurs in isolation, because of course often there's mental health issues, there's other issues going alongside it. And of course, although the charities are working with domestic abuse victims, with veterans, with care leavers, have been supportive of this, the fact of the matter is they're saying, you know, it's all very well saying this, but there simply is a huge shortage of houses for social housing. Shelter, for example, is saying that the government we need to have another 90,000 houses available for social rent every year for the next 10 years to begin to meet the demand for social housing. So a great pledge, but how it's going to happen and how soon it's going to happen, well, that's another question entirely.
Isn't it really, Catherine, that we don't have adequate supplies of social housing just waiting to be taken up by veterans or domestic abuse victims or care leavers and the like? That is the issue for the government. They need to have more housing if they're going to supply it to these types of people. And then, of course, you've got the additional pressure of recent immigration as well to look for housing for all of those numbers, Catherine. The Conservatives have come out, Tom Tugendhat, and he said, well, Labour can't be trusted on veterans because they got rid of the Veterans Minister in Cabinet. Is that fair?
Well, you know, traditionally the Conservative Party have seen themselves as the party of defence and of security, and Labour less so. But of course, the Conservatives' record over the last 14 years on defence, on the military, is not great, frankly, because defence spending has been cut, and we know that you know, serving armed forces often don't have the equipment or the facilities that they deserve. I was in Warsaw with the previous Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, a few months ago, where he was speaking at a military base with the NATO Secretary General, and I said to him about the recruitment crisis in the military and how to encourage young men and women to join up when so often they're not treated as they would be. And it really struck me that he was talking to soldiers there as well as the press, and he apologised to them. He said, look, I know, I'm sorry, often we haven't, you know, done well enough by you, and even serving armed forces, often the military accommodation they're being put in is really, really substandard. So yes, the Conservatives will point their fingers at Labour, but I have to say the Tory record on this isn't fabulous either.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Catherine Forster, our political correspondent there in Liverpool outside the Labour conference. We're going to move on because a memorial for Police Sergeant Matt Ruttner is being unveiled today. He was shot and killed at Croydon Custody Centre on the 25th of September 2020. Now, the New Zealand-born officer had nearly 30 years of service and was nearing retirement at the time. Well, GB News national reporter Charlie Peters joins us now. Charlie, please do tell us.
It was a moving and solemn ceremony that we had here at the Croydon Custody Centre, just closing in the last hour, Emily. And as you said, over 30 years of service in the Metropolitan Police for Sergeant Matt Ruttner, killed in the line of duty 4 years ago today at this custody suite. He moved to this location having worked in boroughs across the country's capital because he thought that the custody suite would be a safe place to end his career and approach his retirement. It wasn't to be, as he was shot in the heart by someone who was being processed and arrested for possession of cannabis at around 1 a.m. 4 years ago today. That man now serving a whole life order in prison. He will never be released. But today was about remembering the man who was killed, remembering a man who was known as a larger-than-life colleague within the Metropolitan Police. Now, just to my right are some of the wreaths that were laid moments ago. One tribute to him saying, "Rest in peace, brother." And just to the left of that wreath is the tribute from Sir Mark Rowley, the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, who said who was thanking him for his service. He spoke movingly earlier today. But after the Commissioner spoke, we also heard from Matt's son, himself a police officer in the police in Australia. He came here to deliver a tribute to his father, saying that Matt Ruttner was a brave officer, and this memorial that had been unveiled represents several sides of what it means to be a police officer.
This stone, with its double-sided design, reflects that duality. To the public, one side stands as a reminder of the sacrifices made in their service. But for the officers driving into and out of this place, it's a personal reminder of the risks that we are faced with and the camaraderie that sustains us.
Well, Matt Ruttner had previously worked in the Royal Protection Department for the Queen Mother and also Diana, the Princess of Wales. His career was commemorated today, his heroism and his frontline service. We also got to speak to one of his former colleagues, Inspector Chris Excel, who told us what today meant to him.
It kind of applies to both, you know, our lives inside and outside the job. But Matt said in his address to the rugby club, you know, whatever your talent, skill set, whatever your background, there's a place for you here. And that resonated with me because when I started out in the job, that was what he personified, is that there was a place for everyone, and he nurtured and engaged everybody, and that would be the most endearing memory that I have of him.
Sergeant Matt Ratana is the first police officer to have been killed in a custody suite, and he was the first police officer to be shot and killed in the line of duty since 2012. We heard from many of the speakers this morning that while there are so many memorials for the soldiers, sailors and airmen who defend the United Kingdom, all too often people overlook the service and the sacrifice of our police officers, dozens of whom who have died in the line of service. The Police Memorial Trust were also represented here and were involved in the unveiling of this memorial. These said that it was right that Sergeant Ratana's service and his sacrifice were honoured with this memorial, and that people can come here to remember his service, his sacrifice, and what it represents to the Metropolitan Police.
Absolutely right, Charlie. A very sad reminder of just the risk that our police officers take in their day-to-day service for this country. Thank you very much indeed. Charlie Peters, our national reporter there. At the Ratana Memorial there. Well, we've got lots more coming up on the show today. Lots of you have been picking up on this story, this latest row over Keir Starmer's freebies. This time, £20,000 in accommodation, courtesy of Lord Ali, of course. His £18 million penthouse. Keir Starmer asked why he needed this accommodation for a few months over the summer period. Well, apparently it was because his son needed somewhere peaceful to revise for his GCSEs. Do you buy that? Do you buy that justification? Who needs an £18 million penthouse in Covent Garden, central London, in order to be to revise for your GCSEs? I mean, a lot of children in this country are revising at the kitchen table, are revising at the library, are revising at school, are revising at a friend's house, are revising at their grandparents', wherever, to try and get some peace and quiet, not an £18 million penthouse. It does appear as though it's one rule for Keir Starmer and one rule for the rest of us, when he's banging on about how parents who put their children through private school should pay more in tax, whereas he's quite happy to get all the privilege for his son when it matters, and he didn't even pay for it. So there you go, go figure. Please do keep getting in touch about that one. Paula says, so Covent Garden, one of the busiest tourist areas in London, gave his son a peaceful place to study. Yes, Paula, that is what we're told to believe, although presumably if it's a penthouse, it's far away from any of the, the noise or the riffraff in Covent Garden. But there you go. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Philip Schofield, he's making a return to television. Did anyone want it?
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Jules Buckley. Queues for the southbound M61. The stretch from Farnworth to Kersley Spur. Junction 4 to 3 has 2 lanes combed off. There's queues for a breakdown back towards West Horton at Junction 5. In the West Midlands, still stop-start on the southbound M6 as you head past Great Bar at 7 towards Spaghetti Junction. The queues back before Junction 9. It follows an earlier collision, but all the lanes are back open. Letchworth in Hertfordshire, Letchworth Gate, that's the A505. Shut both ways between Baldock Lane and Penway and queuing. That's due to a collision there. In Tolworth in London, the Kingston Road southbound, the 240 is blocked between the A3 at the Tolworth Junction and Worcester Park Road. That's queuing at the scene of a collision. And the coastbound M20 in Kent, blocked from the Swanley interchange, the M25 to Junction 3 and queuing. There's a horse on the road there.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This week, Free Speech Brighton, a sister group of the Free Speech Union, claimed that they were kicked out of a pub in the city for discussing trans issues in schools. The group booked a room in a pub for an evening of speeches and discussion when they claimed security guards came and asked them to leave after one speaker began to talk about this topic. Now, a clip of the evening was in fact posted to social media. Can you give us some background to what happened, what the event was for, and why you booked it?
Our normal pub was being refurbished, so about 3 weeks ago I went in and booked a local pub for a meeting, and they didn't ask any questions about what sort of meeting. It was in a back room. It was mainly secluded from the rest of the pub, so I thought it would be fine. But anyway, they didn't ask any questions. They took my booking. We arrived, I set up. The first speaker started speaking, who's a retired teacher who is concerned about trans in schools and how that affects children. But she was talking purely about children. She was not talking about adults who have protected characteristics, obviously. And then towards the end of her speech, I became aware of security guards standing behind me in the middle room. So I went to have a quick word with them and see what they wanted. And they said, we've had a complaint. And I said, what's the complaint? And they wouldn't say. Then they said, will you come and talk to the landlord? So I went to the front of the bar and they indicated this chap was the landlord, but he looked about 20, so I don't think he was the landlord. So I said, I hear you have a complaint about us. Can you tell me what it is? And he couldn't.
That sounds very Kafkaesque, as though you've committed a crime, but they can't tell you what the crime
is. That's what I couldn't understand, because, you know, you might... Obviously, they can't tell you who the complainant is, but they should be able to tell you what the complaint is.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. It is now 12:50 and Philip Schofield, remember him? He's set to make a surprising return to television. He's starring in a secretly filmed Channel 5 survival show. There he is on a desert island by the looks of things. After a 16-month absence following his rather high-profile scandal, the former This Morning host will be marooned on a remote island off Madagascar for 10 days in what promises to be a raw and emotional challenge. Well, there you go. I'm joined by showbiz journalist Suzanne Baum. Suzanne, thank you very much indeed. Just your thoughts on this. Clearly trying to resurrect his career after everything that happened with This Morning. Is there appetite?
Well, look, I've been looking at the news and looking at the social media comments. I think there's appetite. I think with Philip, if, you know, you either hate him or you like him, there's obviously a lot of the former from having read even the Daily Mail comments. And the only thing I can think of is Channel 5 are going to be the winners of this. You know, that's a real coup for them to get a show like this. I think it's a little bit like I covered the Nicola Bulley story, for example, a couple of years ago, and Channel 5 then ran the interview with her husband. And Channel 5 will be bringing in the viewers. I think, you know, people will watch it. And even seeing Schofield's Instagram today, I noticed over 30,000 people have liked his comment. So that's quite a lot of people.
That is
so
quite
I
a lot
do
of...
think...
That is quite a lot of people. He still clearly has a lot of fans who are interested in what he's been up to and interested in him telling his story, because that's what it seems to be about, doesn't it? I'm reading that there are already clips that have been shown from this show where he does address what he went through with all the scandal.
I think what stuck out for me, he says, I know what I did was wrong, but is it enough to destroy someone? That's what the clip shows. And I think no. But that is toxicity of social media, of Twitter that I've come off, because it's just a cesspit of hate. And yes, he did wrong. But
well,
you
Suzanne,
know...
just on that point, remind us of exactly what happened, because it was a little time ago now, just to remind our viewers exactly what went down at This Morning.
Is it not on the show now? Oh.
Pardon?
You want me to remind you?
Yes, please remind us of the scandal and why it's such a surprise that we're now seeing him back on the TV.
Well, I think after 16 months, I think this happened 16 months ago, where he was on This Morning and was accused and admitted to seeing, I think it maybe was, I'm not sure of the age, so don't quote me on that, a colleague that was very young. And he admitted he was wrong, and there was a lot of lies and allegations around at the time. And then he left. I can't remember about, you know, what exactly happened, but he admitted he was wrong. He admitted that he'd hurt lots of people, that I think he had lied.
There was such a drama between him and Holly Willoughby, and they'd fallen out. Were they still friends? Had they fallen out? And the double act was destroyed, ended as a result of all of this. Do you think that going forward, we'll see more and more of him then?
I don't know. I suppose, look, he took 60 months off. I noticed, in the words of my friend Max Dundas, who's a publicist, you know, you tread the water with a couple of social media posts, you see what reaction you get. And then he's going on this show. So I do think people are going to watch it. Look, he's got 2.7 million followers, which is a lot. I don't think he lost that many when, you know, he left the show and was under all this scrutiny. So I think people will watch it. Obviously,
people love a comeback, don't they, Suzanne? People love a comeback. Thank you very much indeed for your time. We'll have to leave it there. Suzanne Baum, showbiz journalist. Thank you very much indeed. Philip Schofield's big comeback. Are you ready for it? We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Don't go anywhere. We are going to be checking in on what's been happening with regards to Keir Starmer on his trip to the United States. Stay tuned.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest forecast for GB News from the Met Office. It's a fine start in the north today, but it is turning increasingly cloudy with outbreaks of rain turning up from the southwest because low pressure is arriving from the Atlantic. That low taking a southward path across the UK, and so it's already turning wet across Wales and the southwest. And those outbreaks of rain are steadily moving northeastwards through the day, reaching London and the southeast by the mid-afternoon, parts of Northern Ireland likewise. Meanwhile, northern and some parts of eastern England staying largely dry with some cloud. Showers for northern Scotland and a cold wind here. And that's where it's going to stay here for the next few days. But further south, well, we've got that rain to end things on Wednesday. Some brighter skies returning to Cornwall and Devon, but across much of Wales, the Midlands into the southeast, it's a damp evening rush hour. Northern Ireland, parts of northwest England, southwest Scotland also seeing the cloud and rain turning up by this stage. But northern Scotland, a mix of bright spells and showers as we go into the evening. Now, the rain in the south will steadily journey north, and then it will tend to stall across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and northern England, as well as North Wales overnight. The rain will be heaviest for northeast England, and it will be accumulating significantly through Thursday, with the risk of 80 millimetres in places, particularly over the likes of the North York Moors and parts of the Pennines. That could cause some issues first thing Thursday, tricky travel conditions and the risk of localised flooding. Further south, things do brighten up through Thursday morning, but there'll be some heavy, potentially thundery showers across the south and southeast. In Scotland, as well as Northern Ireland, things do brighten up, and then we'll see a mixture of sunny spells with some scattered showers in the far north.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather.
You could be the next great watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
70% of population will make a judgment on someone just by looking at them. And within 2-3 seconds, we make a decision if we like someone or not.
Really? Is it that quick?
So it's actually very, very fast. So before we have a chance to kind of express what we want to say, our subconscious mind is kind of looking for clues. So you look at someone and you look at their, for example, I don't know, the watch they're wearing, maybe the makeup. I spent literally my whole childhood learning, being absolutely mesmerized by my mom's ability to choose different style of clothing for different style personalities. British definitely take a pride in their appearance. They do spend time to look good. There is a lot of amazing British designers. For me, it was always about that feeling that I've learned from my mom's shop, how the people were living, buying certain things. And I was like, oh my God, they look happy. They've got this big smile on their face. My main objective always was to make people feel good. So now as a stylist, I help them to go through style therapy. I help them to discover colors that are good for their colors that they wear them close to their face, but also it sets the tone for their wardrobe. And then we look at the outfit formula. So it's, yeah. When I look at Ellie's dress sense, I was just thinking, okay, she likes to be polished.
I do like to be polished.
Exactly. Elegant. Timeless. I look at the reference to the dress you're wearing today. It's that kind of Chanel black and white, timeless, never go out of fashion. So for me, it's about it's not the trends, but how you would like your personal style to be and how timeless it can be.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 25th of September. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood, live as the Labour Party conference concludes.
Fantastic stuff. Now, leave Lebanon now. The Prime Minister demands Brits evacuate immediately from the country as the conflict in the Middle East escalates. And yet another Labour donation blunder. The Prime Minister, he accepted accommodation worth over £20,000 from, guess who? Lord Ali. Asked why he did this, Starmer said it was to help his teenage son peacefully study for his GCSEs. Has he heard of a library? And Met badge outrage. Metropolitan police officers have been banned from wearing a badge that commemorates hero cops who've been killed in the line of duty. Why would they ban such a thing? Tom, thank you very much. Indeed, you're still in Liverpool. How is this latest news on Freebie Gate, the freebies that Keir Starmer has taken from Lord Ali, going down?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Keir Starmer actually left this conference yesterday. He flew off to New York for the United Nations General Assembly. It's meant that he's missed the scandals breaking in the papers overnight here in the United Kingdom, and also missed that big vote that the unions had been pushing that was delayed until today, that meant that this conference has officially backed a policy different to that of the Labour Party. They have voted against to condemn the idea of taking away winter fuel payments from pensioners. So it's all turning out to be probably a good idea that the Prime Minister had left this conference quite so early.
Yes, I think it was all carefully timed, don't you? Thank you very much indeed, Tom Harwood. We'll catch up with you in a little bit. And in the meantime, please do get in touch at home. gbnews.com/your say is the way to do so. I am going to get to some of your comments because lots of you are, let's say, a little enraged about this latest freebie that we're hearing Keir Starmer got his hands on. gbnews.com/your say is the way to get in touch. But first, the news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Emily, thank you. The top stories. Labour has reaffirmed its decision to cut the winter fuel payment after party delegates voted for the government to reverse the move.
Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel!
While there's nothing binding about the vote, it puts further pressure on Labour over its decision to take away the benefit from millions of pensioners. The motion was put forward by the Unite union, which has accused the government of embarking on, quote, austerity Mark II. Whilst it's a step in the right direction, Unite Union's General Secretary Sharon Graham told GB News the vote should have happened sooner.
Well, look, I think this vote should have happened on Tuesday. I mean, the vote was down under the economy debate on Tuesday, and I think it is disrespectful to the issue that we weren't hearing that vote earlier on under the economy debate. Look, the reality here is that they're going to have to reverse this allowance in terms of putting it back into the pockets of pensioners, and we're asking them to do that. I disagree with what the Prime Minister is saying on this. I'm really glad we've got a Labour government. I think Britain is better off with a Labour government, but on this issue, it is a huge misstep, and he needs to change what he has done. And I think the country out there, it's not really what happens in this hall that's important, it's what's happening there in the real world. They are furious about it.
Health Secretary Wes Streeting has told the Labour Party conference on its fourth and final day the NHS is letting people down as he promised to defend it as a public service.
I know the doctor's diagnosis can sometimes be hard to hear, but if you don't have an accurate diagnosis, you won't provide the correct prescription. And when you put protecting the reputation of the NHS above protecting patients, you're not helping the NHS, you're killing it with kindness. So I say respectfully, but unequivocally, I won't back down. The NHS is broken, but it's not beaten, and together we will turn it around.
In other news, the Prime Minister suggested he accepted £20,000 in donations for accommodation because his son needed somewhere to revise for his GCSEs while his family home was besieged by journalists during the election campaign. Sakir defended his decision to take gifts from Labour peer Lord Ali amid criticism, saying he was not going to apologise for not doing anything wrong. And he also said the freebies didn't cost the taxpayer a penny. Sakir signalled he could continue to accept hospitality from donors, saying it was a matter of judgment for individual MPs. The Prime Minister's told Britons in Lebanon to leave immediately as around 700 UK troops are deployed to Cyprus to oversee an emergency evacuation. It says Sakir Starmer's in New York for the UN General Assembly. Warning sirens sounded in Tel Aviv this morning as a missile was intercepted by air defence systems after it was detected crossing from Lebanon. Terror group Hezbollah's confirmed it launched a rocket targeting Mossad headquarters near Israel's capital. Hezbollah says the Mossad's responsible for assassinating leaders and blowing up pages and walkie-talkies in Lebanon, a claim which has been denied by the Israeli president. Sakir Starmer says the government are ramping up the contingency plans in light of the escalation, with fears growing of all-out war between Israel and Hezbollah. More than 500 people, including women and children, have been killed in the last 24 hours. Now, the Police Memorial Trust has unveiled a specially commissioned memorial stone dedicated to the memory of Police Sergeant Matt Rutner of the Metropolitan Police Service. Sergeant Rutner, a New Zealand-born British police officer, was shot and killed in Croydon Custody Centre in 2020. The officer was nearing retirement, having served nearly 30 years in the police. Louis de Soysa opened fire at the Croydon Custody Suite. De Soysa had earlier been arrested and searched, but officers failed to find the gun the 26-year-old had hidden in an underarm holster despite discovering bullets in his pocket. Philip Schofield has announced he'll return to television 16 months after his departure from ITV's This Morning. The former TV star will appear on a Channel 5 special called Castaway. In a post on Instagram, he said, "Now you know how I spent my summer. Alone, for 10 days, no food, no water, no crew." The 62-year-old resigned from ITV last May after he admitted to a, quote, unwise but not illegal affair with a younger male colleague. And a new weather warning for heavy rain has been issued by the Met Office, which could cause further widespread flooding and travel disruption. The yellow warning's been issued for much of England and Wales, parts of the West Midlands and the northwest of England between 5 p.m. tomorrow and 10 a.m. on Friday. The Met Office says there's some uncertainty in the details of this warning, but some areas could see up to 30 millimetres of rain in 2 to 3 hours. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
OK, welcome back. This is Good Afternoon, Britain. Now, as we've been discussing, Sakir Starmer, he's embroiled in yet another freebie scandal. He accepted £20,000, over £20,000 in donation towards accommodation so that his son apparently could study for his GCSEs undisturbed. Yes, this was all apparently. He took this £20,000 worth of accommodation from Lord Ali, of course. Who else? This penthouse, this £18 million penthouse in Covent Garden. Yes, all so that his son could be undisturbed by the press or any reporters that might be outside his house. He needed to be able to study for his GCSEs unperturbed. Well, let's take a listen to Sakir Starmer's justification.
Beginning of the election, which we didn't know when it was going to be called, my boy, 16, was in the middle of his GCSEs. I made him a promise that he would be able to get to his school, do his exams without being disturbed. We had lots of journalists outside our house where we lived. Now, I'm not complaining about that, that's fine. But if you're a 16-year-old trying to do your GCSEs and it's your one chance in life, I promised him we would move someone, we'd get out of that house and go somewhere where he could be peacefully studying. Somebody then offered me accommodation where we could do that, and I took it up, and it was the right thing to do for my boy.
Well, we can go back to Liverpool now and speak to Tom Harwood. Tom, thank you very much indeed. I'm not sure whether people will believe that justification from Sir Keir Starmer. What do you think?
Well, one would have thought that there are plenty of options where a 16-year-old could study for GCSEs that don't cost £20,000, that aren't an £18 million luxury penthouse in the heart of Covent Garden, the most expensive postcode in the country. One would have thought that perhaps alternative accommodation could be found, but also I think there's a deeper question here, which is the timing and the dates. The Starmer family stayed in this penthouse long beyond the end of GCSEs, meaning that perhaps this wasn't entirely a GCSE-related decision. It is, of course, interesting to look at the context of all of this, the number of free gifts given by Lord Ali to the Prime Minister, to his wife, to his top team, to the Chancellor, to the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party. It all starts to look very curious that this one man is bankrolling the lifestyles of some of the most senior politicians in the country. And it is interesting also to note that these politicians have now said that they won't be accepting any more free clothes or the like from Lord Ali or any other donor. That begins to point to the idea that perhaps these politicians know that what they were doing in taking all of this free accommodation, free clothes and gifts was untoward, was not the right thing to do. Otherwise, why would they have stopped doing it now?
Is there a worry, Tom, that so many of our senior Labour politicians, including the Prime Minister, almost appear to be reliant on this one Labour peer, this one Labour donor, for so much of their lifestyle?
Yes, it's strange, isn't it, that this wasn't taking donations from across the board from many different donors, as you might see in the United States. This was entirely, as you say, reliant on one donor for so much of the lifestyle, the clothes, the accommodation and everything else of these senior politicians. Perhaps it's little wonder that this Labour donor got given an exclusive pass to Downing Street in the early days of this administration, the sort of pass that even senior cabinet ministers don't get. That's the sort of access that has seemingly been bought. Now, that pass has been handed back. Lord Ali, we're told, no longer has a pass to Downing Street, and yet report after report appears of Lord Ali having meetings in Downing Street despite not having that pass any longer. So yes, there are questions about how close this individual is to decision-making in this country, how reliant politicians have been upon this individual, and what that means for our democracy, what that means for the integrity of the government.
Yeah, it doesn't really pass the sniff test, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many people who are getting in touch with us on the show today, Tom, I must say. We also found out this week, didn't we, that Keir Starmer has paid off his entire mortgage on his £2 million London home. This is very interesting because, correct me if I'm wrong, but he made a little bit of political capital, didn't he, in the run-up to the election, off the back of saying that he understood people's concerns about interest rates. Well, does he?
Well, this is a question, of course, because the Labour Party was very quick to throw questions of Rishi Sunak's wealth into the political fray when he became Prime Minister, suggesting that perhaps Rishi Sunak, as a man of means, didn't understand the trials and tribulations that ordinary people go through day to day, trying to live paycheck to paycheck. Well, now it turns out that Keir Starmer doesn't have a mortgage, has a £2 million home, has been staying in luxury apartments that he does not have to pay for, has his clothes bought for him, and indeed, that's all on top of his £167,000 salary as Prime Minister, significant capital gains receipts that he has had through the sale of other land. This is a very, very wealthy man. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a very wealthy man. He has been incredibly successful. He has been a very successful lawyer. He's clearly a very intelligent individual. But the hypocrisy charge is one that stands. When the Labour Party in opposition made political capital out of attacking the former Prime Minister over his wealth, and is now trying to avoid that precise scrutiny when the shoe is on the other foot.
And also when you're seen to want to make life more difficult for parents who decide to send their children to private school, but then you're very happy to take donations to give your son every privilege he needs, an £18 million penthouse stay to revise for his GCSEs. I mean, that would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think everyone would like the privilege of staying in an £18 million luxury penthouse to have the peace and quiet to revise for GCSEs. One might suggest that that's more of an advantage than going to a fee-paying school. But clearly that is another charge of hypocrisy. The idea that the Labour Party has not been in favour of parents making choices for their own children on the grounds of equality, that is a line you often hear from Labour politicians, Labour delegates here at the conference. And yet, that's precisely what the Prime Minister is doing, not sending his child to a fee-paying school, but through donations, providing privilege to his child in order to have the best chance at the best GCSEs.
Yes, and I would like to put to the Prime Minister whether perhaps he may have given his child the privilege of private tutors alongside that state education. We shall see. Perhaps we'll find out. I don't know. But Tom Harwood, thank you very much indeed. Outside the conference in Liverpool that has wrapped up in recent minutes, I guess. Anyway, in other news, tensions are continuing to increase in the Middle East as Israel's Iron Dome is forced to intercept missiles fired by Hezbollah after thousands of pagers and walkie-talkies unexpectedly exploded in Lebanon. Israel launched its biggest offensive yet on the country. Now, thousands of British nationals in the area are being told to leave immediately for their safety. Well, joining us now is former NATO commander and former Ministry of Defence Director General Chris Parry. Chris, Brits and others being told to evacuate the area as quickly as possible does show how dangerous the region is becoming.
Well, I think the region's been pretty volatile for some time now. And if you're a Brit there, you've been expecting this for some time, I think.
So, Chris, you're not surprised by the recent escalation then?
Not at all. I mean, if you bear in mind that 80,000 people in northern Israel had to evacuate their homes back in October. They want to get back to their homes. They want a stable northern border. And I think we discussed before that at some stage, Israel's going to have to deal with Hezbollah. And they've obviously decided this is the time to do it.
And how much, in your view, from what you can tell, has Israel managed to weaken Hezbollah?
Hezbollah is very strong in terms of its material on the ground. It's got a very good sort of cellular structure whereby they can build up a capacity pretty quickly if they want to do something. But they're being thoroughly disrupted right now by the Israelis and their technology. You mentioned the pagers, the walkie-talkies. I'm sure there are a few other surprises for Hezbollah as well. The real strength of Hezbollah, of course, is in its ballistic and rocket launchers. Probably got about 150,000 of those. That could saturate the Iron Dome and the other defensive measures that Israel have got. But I'm sure that Israel probably has a plan for those. I think Israel has made the choice that if we're going to get condemned for dealing with Hamas, we might as well deal with Hezbollah at the same time.
Well, our official has said that the pager and the walkie-talkie attacks put 1,500 fighters out of action due to their injuries, many having lost their hands or sight. This is obviously a blow to Hezbollah, but they are 40,000 to 50,000 strong.
Yeah, but they can't do anything if they can't move. I mean, one of the things that the Israelis complain about, of course, is that Hezbollah was supposed to have withdrawn behind the Litani River after the confrontation in 2006. They haven't done that. So one of the things we might anticipate is an Israeli ground offensive to actually push them back to the Litani River, so they can't actually mobilize all those fighters. And we've seen in Gaza that the Israelis are capable of doing that, and I suspect that's the next move.
And unfortunately, there have been a considerable number of civilian casualties.
This is a war zone. I visited Beirut back in the 1970s with the Royal Navy. I was there when the confrontations were starting in 1983, and it's been pretty belligerent ever since. And I'm afraid to say, if you live there, just as you live on the slopes of a volcano, things are going to happen every now and then, and it's very regrettable. But if you get between two conflicting and contesting powers, and then these things are going to happen.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Chris Parry, for your time. Appreciate it. Former Ministry of Defence Director General, NATO Commander. Thank you very much indeed. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Yes, the winter fuel vote. It didn't go in favour of Labour's decision to scrap those winter fuel payments. That's next.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
You know, is the fact that electric blanket sales going up actually a good thing? This means that people are switched on to the problems that the winter might hold, that they might have some defence against it, or is it a real indictment of a Labour government that they aren't going to be able to, you know, support elderly people in their hour of need?
Good morning, by the way.
Morning.
I think the sale of electric blankets may well be because we've had this cold snap because of the Arctic weather coming in from the north. However, I think it's an absolute reality that, as your clip said, that over 800,000 elderly people who are eligible for the winter fuel allowance, who can get pension credits, are struggling to apply. And so what is absolutely essential at the moment is that all of those older people who are eligible for pension credits do apply and do get what's owed to them. The benefits are owed to them. And the average that people will get through pension credits is about £78 a week. So that's definitely going to make a massive difference to people who are really struggling.
What can organisations like yours do to encourage people to, I guess, educate themselves on technology and make that first step into the digital world, which is very intimidating at times?
Absolutely, and that's what we do at Good Things Foundation. So we're a national charity. We work all across the whole of the UK. And in your clip there, you had Links Digital, and they're a member of what we call the National Digital Inclusion Network, which is a network of local charities, small local community organisations, food banks, job centres, old people's clubs. So anyone, any organisation at that local level.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
The king of breakfast TV is back. That's right. Britain's favourite TV host, Eamon Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 1:23. Now, Labour Party delegates have voted to reverse the proposed cuts to the winter fuel payments that will affect millions of pensioners. Now, the result is non-binding, but it will still come as quite a blow to Sir Keir Starmer, who's already been accused of losing control of his party just a few months after winning his landslide in July's general election. Now, this is a difficult one. So you've got Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, who are absolutely adamant that this is the right policy for Britain. This is how they're going to prove that Labour can be trusted on the economy. This is how they're going to ensure that that 22 billion financial black hole is filled in, if you believe there is such a thing, if you believe those numbers stack up. But there you go. That's the justification from Keir Starmer. This is how he's going to prove that he's getting the economy back on track. He's going to cut these payments to pensioners, which presumably he believes are no longer affordable in this country. I mean, you could say there's huge amounts of money going to absolutely everything else, from climate change activities and international climate funds to GB Energy, which is due to be based in Aberdeen, we hear this week, to huge amounts being put to public sector pay rises across the board. We know the nurses as well have turned down their 5.5%, so they'll be looking for an increase as well. But no, it's pensioners. It's pensioners who have been told that they need to cut their cloth a little tighter, pull those purse strings in a little tighter. But yes, the unions who support the Labour Party by and large, they are absolutely furious about this decision by Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. I mean, one of the backers said that this is essentially austerity 2.0, and this just is not what people voted for. They did not believe that by voting Labour, they'd be removing welfare from pensioners who need it this winter. The government, of course, say that the very poorest pensioners will still receive this payment, but 9-10 million pensioners will not be receiving it this winter. But yes, this vote at the conference, very much going against Keir Starmer, can be seen as a bit of a humiliation, or at least a blow. But of course, he's in the United States. He wasn't there to witness this. He wasn't at the conference to witness this. But there you go, Labour delegates voting against one of his keynote policies. Really, it is one of his keynote policies. We're going to come back to that in a little bit. But first, let's turn to the Prince of Wales, because he says this year's Earthshot Prize finalists are the most exciting nominees ever. That was in a video Prince William released, where he also unveiled those who had made the shortlist. Now, our royal correspondent Cameron Walker has done some digging. He has more.
I'm delighted to introduce you to this year's 15 new Earthshot Prize finalists. These solutions are some of the most exciting, innovative and impactful we've seen, and the people behind them are true inspirations. I know you're as passionate as I am about making a difference to our planet, and we can't wait to share their stories with you.
Prince William's unveiled his fourth cohort of Earthshot Prize finalists, each finding a new solution to repair the planet, with an ambition to scale it and tackle what are claimed to be urgent climate challenges. 15 finalists from across the world are now in the running to receive 5 £1 million prizes, which will be awarded in Cape Town this November. British finalists Douglas Martin, who founded MyAlgae, offering a sustainable plant-based alternative to fish oil, and Dimple Patel from Nature Metrics, which uses eDNA to produce an accurate picture of an area's biodiversity, explains how Prince William is having an impact.
The networks that Prince William's able to open, and honestly, just to be here and to see the people in the room is a testament to the amount of work that he's put in.
Is able to really drive forward that conversation of we can do this properly, we can use the right data, we can quantify our impact, and then we can hold people accountable to make sure that we're taking the steps we need to build a greener future.
The Prince of Wales started this mission in 2020, keen to turn doom and gloom scaremongering into climate optimism. There are 5 categories, or Earthshots: protect and restore nature, clean our air, revive our oceans, build a waste-free world, and fix our climate. Inspired by John F. Kennedy's Moonshot project achieving the seemingly impossible task to put a man on the moon, Prince William wants to find seemingly impossible solutions to restore the planet. He's taking after his father, the King, and grandfather, Prince Philip, as environmentalists, and Michael Bloomberg, who now advises Earthshot winners, believes the future King's focus is young people.
The Prince is helping the next generation lead the way by building on his family's long track record of environmental stewardship.
From transforming food waste into nutritious ingredients to bringing clean energy to rural Africa, this year's finalists are hoping to make a global impact. The prize ceremony is just weeks away, but that will just be the start of their journey to make that dream into a reality. Cameron Walker, GB News.
Well, there we go. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Now, we've got lots more coming up on today's show. That winter fuel payment vote, we will be speaking to an expert on that very shortly. What does it mean for Keir Starmer? Has it shaken his authority? After your headlines.
Emily, thank you. The top stories. Labour has reaffirmed its decision to cut the winter fuel payment after party delegates voted for the government to reverse the move.
Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel!
While there's nothing binding about the vote, it puts further pressure on Labour over its decision to take away the benefit from millions of pensioners. The motion was put forward by the Unite union, which has accused the government of embarking on, quote, austerity Mark II. Whilst it's a step in the right direction, Unite Union's General Secretary Sharon Graham told GB News the vote should have happened sooner.
Well, look, I think this vote should happen on Tuesday. I mean, the vote was down under the economy debate on Tuesday, and I think it is disrespectful to the issue that we weren't hearing that vote earlier on under the economy debate. Look, the reality here is that they're going to have to reverse this allowance in terms of putting it back into the pockets of pensioners, and we're asking them to do that. I disagree with what the Prime Minister is saying on this. I'm really glad we've got a Labour government. I think Britain is better off with a Labour government, but on this issue, it is a huge misstep, and he needs to change what he has done. And I think the country out there, it's not really what happens in this hall that's important, it's what's happening there in the real world. They are furious about it.
The Health Secretary has told the Labour Party conference on its fourth and final day that the NHS is letting people down, as he promised to defend it as a public service.
I know the doctor's diagnosis can sometimes be hard to hear. But if you don't have an accurate diagnosis, you won't provide the correct prescription. And when you put protecting the reputation of the NHS above protecting patients, you're not helping the NHS, you're killing it with kindness. So I say respectfully, but unequivocally, I won't back down. The NHS is broken, but it's not beaten, and together we will turn it around.
Philip Schofield has announced he'll return to television 16 months after his departure from ITV's This Morning. The former TV star will appear on a Channel 5 special called Castaway. In a post on Instagram, he said, "Now you know how I spent my summer, alone for 10 days, no food, no water, no crew." The 62-year-old resigned from ITV last May after he admitted to a, quote, unwise but not illegal affair with a younger male colleague. And some breaking news to bring you in the last few minutes that the RMT union has announced that rail workers have voted overwhelmingly to accept pay offers from train companies and Network Rail. More on this as we get it. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there and welcome to the latest forecast for GB News from the Met Office. It's a fine start in the north today, but it is turning increasingly cloudy with outbreaks of rain turning up from the southwest because low pressure is arriving from the Atlantic. That low taking a southward path across the UK, and so it's already turning wet across Wales and the southwest. And those outbreaks of rain are steadily moving northeastwards through the day, reaching London and the southeast by the mid-afternoon. Parts of Northern Ireland likewise. Meanwhile, northern and some parts of eastern England staying largely dry with some cloud. Showers for northern Scotland and a cold wind here. And that's where it's going to stay here for the next few days. But further south, well, we've got that rain to end things on Wednesday. Some brighter skies returning to Cornwall and Devon, but across much of Wales, the Midlands into the southeast, it's a damp evening rush hour. Northern Ireland, parts of northwest England, southwest Scotland also seeing the cloud and rain turning up by this stage. But northern Scotland, a mix of bright spells and showers as we go into the evening. Now, the rain in the south will steadily journey north and then it will tend to stall across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and northern England as well as North Wales overnight. The rain will be heaviest for northeast England and it will be accumulating significantly through Thursday with the risk of 80 millimetres in places, particularly over the likes of the North York Moors and parts of the Pennines. That could cause some issues first thing Thursday, tricky travel conditions and the risk of localised flooding. Further south, things do brighten up through Thursday morning, but there'll be some heavy, potentially thundery showers across the south and southeast. In Scotland, as well as Northern Ireland, things do brighten up, and we'll see a mixture of sunny spells with some scattered showers in the far north.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. A couple of issues in London this lunchtime. Firstly, in Welling, you're heading for Belgrove Road. That's being shut between Welling High Street and Welling Corner. Keys back to the football ground there. A collision is still causing delays. And in Wembley, the westbound side of East Lane, that's the A4088. That's blocked from Wembley Hill Road through towards Castleton Avenue, and queuing both sides just towards the stadium there. Again, it's at the scene of a collision. Now, there's emergency repairs at the moment underway. The northbound M11, just after the M25 at Junction 6, a lane shut is queuing back on towards the anti-clockwise M25. And in Devon, in Tiverton, St Paul Street is closed. No way through at the moment between Great Western Way and Bridge Street. There's no return car. Naturally, that's causing congestion. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Well, welcome back. It is now 1:35. Now we're going to be catching up with Tom Harwood, my usual co-host, who is still in Liverpool for us at the Labour Party conference. I want to ask him a little bit about what Wes Streeting had to say. He gave his speech earlier this morning about the NHS. Were there concrete policy proposals on how he's going to reform the NHS? There's been a lot of talk about how bad the NHS is, hasn't there? There's been a huge amount of talk about how it's not efficient enough, how it's not saving enough lives, how people are having to wait endless amounts of times to try and get an appointment or a surgery or whatever else it is. So now it's time to start fixing it, isn't it? So what big changes are coming down the line for the NHS? It certainly needs them, doesn't it? But you've been getting in touch a lot about Keir Starmer and this freebie that he's accepted, another freebie that he's accepted from Lord Ali. This time it's the £20,000 worth of accommodation from Lord Ali, which was to stay in an £18 million penthouse in Covent Garden, central London. Keir Starmer said it was so that his son, who was studying for his GCSEs, could do so peacefully without the threat of the press being outside their £2 million London home. Do you buy it? Kev certainly doesn't. You're in Manchester. You say Labour are insulting the public with all the dog ate my homework excuses for their freeloading. Yes, have you noticed, actually, that when Labour politicians, ministers have been asked about freebies that they've accepted or that Keir Starmer's accepted, they often use the excuse of, well, it was a nice thing for my children. Stop bringing the children into it. Just admit that you took something because you wanted it. Anyway, a concerned peaceful patriot says, funny how Labour socialists want to be millionaires and live the millionaire lifestyle. Angela Rayner will be a millionaire in a couple of years, along with her fellow hypocrites. I think there's quite a lot to that, you know? Clearly, the left-wing ideology of wanting those with the broadest shoulders to take the largest burden when it comes to tax. OK, that's absolutely fine. But it's interesting, isn't it, that you have many ministers, including the Prime Minister, who are wanting to live a lavish lifestyle beyond their means, and as long as it's being donated by someone else, that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. Robert says, Starmer is not the only MP who caught up in their self-importance. They're thinking they do not need to obey the rules, which they command others to. Leaders who have good judgment ensure they try hard to be above criticism. Unfortunately for him, he does not appear to have good judgment and also does not care. And Jonathan, this is an interesting point from Jonathan. He says, how does Keir look when he said he'd refuse private health support during the debates? Absolute hypocrisy, Emily. Yes, it does cast that comment in a different light. If he's happy to take donations from a millionaire when it comes to accommodation, why wouldn't he take a donation for, say, another luxury, like private healthcare? It all doesn't stack up, does it? And also, it's quite worrying that one single man is bankrolling luxury lifestyle for so many of our ministers, including our Prime Minister. It's very, very odd. Very, very odd. Something isn't quite right there. We spoke to Nigel Nelson a little bit earlier, who didn't completely defend Keir Starmer, but he did put his side across a little bit. Someone here said, given we all pay tax which goes into education, you cannot say you are giving a tax break to those who choose to send their kids private. These parents are effectively paying twice. Yes, Keir Starmer talked about how he needs to put VAT on private school fees to level the playing field, for everyone between state and private school, and to help equalise things. What's equalising about putting your son up in a £18 billion penthouse so he can study for his GCSEs? I mean, it just does not stack up at all. Fed Up says, why didn't Starmer book a holiday home and his wife go and live in it with their children? Well, yes, why not rent somewhere quieter for your son? I mean, you've got the money, clearly. You've paid your mortgage on your £2 billion London home. I mean, there was a lot of talk about how Rishi Sunak was so out of touch because he was so rich and things. Is there that much of a difference when you're taking donations from millionaires and living that lifestyle but not on your own dime? Well, we're going to keep your views coming in. Please do. We're going to be catching up with Tom Harwood in just a moment. But just to let you know as well that there's still plenty of time to grab a chance to win an incredible £36,000 in the Great British Giveaway. That's like having an extra £3,000 in your bank account each month for a whole year, which means the next year could be on us, and it could be a rather nice year. Here's how you can make all of that tax-free cash yours.
You could be the next Great British Giveaway winner with a whopping £36,000 in tax-free cash in your bank account. Imagine getting the winning phone call for that on demand. Good luck.
Well, there you go. That's how to win £36,000 in cash on us. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Keir Starmer, has he been dealt a blow with this revolt at the Labour conference when it comes to the winter fuel payment? The unions aren't happy. Many Labour members aren't happy. Will he U-turn on this, or will he stay adamant that cutting winter fuel payments for pensioners is the way, apparently, to stabilise our economy? Stay with us.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Earlier this week, Olympic swimmer Adam Peaty finally proposed to his girlfriend, because I've been waiting for this, the daughter of Gordon Ramsay, with a gorgeous yellow diamond ring.
Yeah, so the demand for coloured diamonds in the last 10 years has soared by, guess how much, 77% between 2010 and 2019. Joining us now to tell us more about some of the hottest trends in the diamond world is dealer to the stars, Neil Dutson. Good morning, Neil. Morning, Ben. And I've got one of your exemplary examples. Look at this bad boy.
So
What's this one?
That's a very rare Muso Colombian emerald. And it's alpine green translucent, so it's a really stunning
See if
colour.
we get a close-up.
So, yeah, so pretty impressive.
Can I be very crude and ask how much this is worth?
So value is £200,000.
How much, sorry?
£200,000. Now, the reason is its rarity. It's minor oiling. It's very, very, very pretty. The two diamonds on the side are D-colour, flawless diamonds, just to accentuate the setting.
Neil, how did you get into diamonds?
I studied diamonds in Antwerp. So Antwerp used to be the diamond capital of the world, really. Yeah. 85% of the world's diamonds go through Antwerp, or used to. And now Dubai has taken over. And yeah, I just went to a school there. I learnt about diamonds, and I just didn't want to be seen off in the future.
Neil, I'm very concerned I'm going to drop 200 grand's worth of diamonds into my cup of tea, so can I give that back to you?
Absolutely.
But I can hold one if you like.
Oh, well, I've got
Neil.
a lovely one here.
Thank you.
So this is a fancy vivid yellow. It's 8 carats.
This is my dream ring, just so you know, for this hand. This would be
Is it big
amazing.
enough?
So what would I call this? A yellow?
So that's a natural fancy vivid yellow diamond. Value £300,000. So,
it fits
depends
like
where
a
you're
glove.
buying it from.
It fits like a glove, Neil.
Oh.
Maybe it's a sign. It's meant to be mine.
It's definitely a sign, yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions.
That raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return.
And a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in this studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Britain I grew up in was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth. Available at gbnews.com.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 1:45. Now, this is an interesting one. Do you know your courgettes from your cucumbers, your turnips from your parsnips, or your beetroots from your radishes? Well, I hope you do. But according to a new survey, children are struggling to correctly name their vegetables, and the ones they struggle with the most are beetroot, squash, and courgette. But in more positive news, nearly half of primary school kids have now tried to grow their own. Really? That's very interesting. Annette, joining us now is parenting journalist Annette Kello. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, why do you suppose some children don't know their vegetables?
Well, I think it's a whole conundrum, actually, with children not knowing their vegetables. I think it's a lack of exposure, but also, whilst they say they're growing them in school, I think there's a lack of education. But you combine that with time constraints and money. I think it would be rude not to talk about some people would find it difficult to always have the best organic. And I think you have sort of a recipe for disaster. No pun intended.
See, that's a controversial point you make there, because when people say healthy food is more expensive and less accessible, I always get people writing in saying healthy food is the cheapest. You can get vegetables for next to nothing. You can get your parsnips for next to nothing. You can get your squash. You can get your beetroot. You can whip something up, a home-cooked meal, and it will cost you far less than getting something pre-packaged.
Well, yes, I do think you can, there's a market near me, a pounder bowl at the end of the day. You can get stuff. But I think if we're looking at it as a whole, for example, things like, as well, not just vegetables, but meat, that can be very, you want to have all the components to have a nutritious meal. Also, I think there's a psychological thing with children. They get funny about certain vegetables. They get, I know, for example, my son, he just loves avocados. He'd have avocados all day. So you have this thing of they get preferences. And then you have to go with it.
Yeah, I mean, this interesting too that so many children are growing their own vegetables. I didn't know that. Is that at school or is that at home?
Yeah, I think I took my son in the summer to gardening club.
Oh, yes.
That was really good. Lots of fun growing things. I think that's becoming very popular to learn about it. But we have to remember, especially in cities, children don't necessarily have the space or the garden.
Well, quite, yes. If you don't have a garden, it's a bit tricky.
You could try it on your windowsill, give it a try. It's always good. But I think as well, children need to know about making the food, where it's coming from. As well, you often see parents hiding vegetables in sauces or like getting frozen veg because they're like, oh, that's quick and easy. But I think it is really important to go back to basics and try things like, there's also pick your own farms. They're really good. I've been to them. You go, you weigh everything. There's turn food into a hobby, basically.
Well, that makes it fun, doesn't it? And parents often say that if you cook with your children and they're involved in the process, then they're going to be far more likely to try something new. So try that funny-looking vegetable. Try that lentil that they've never seen before. Things that young children might go, ugh, turn their nose up at. Actually, if they're involved in the process, like if they're involved in the actual growing of the produce, they're far more likely to actually get stuck in.
Get in the zone with it. Yeah, I agree with you. But I also think they need to do it. They can't just also rely on schools, for example. I know a lot of parents think, oh, it's all happening at school. They're getting the nutrition. They're learning about veg there. But I also think we have to look at schools. It is £2.30 per meal per pupil, but 40% of that goes towards staff, electricity and overhead. So their meal is about £1 something. So I don't think they're necessarily getting the food education at school. I know that sounds harsh, but I think it's about knowing yourself.
Yes, true. And, of course, there are some kids who bring in their packed lunch and it's just, a white bread sandwich with a bit of jam inside or, one piece of cheese. Not very diverse in what they're getting. But what would you recommend to parents who have children who who just won't eat these types of vegetables that we're looking at, just won't eat the turnips or the parsnips or the carrots or the courgettes or anything that looks a bit different. What do you think parents should do to try and encourage the children to actually try those things?
Well, I think they could start by finding gardening clubs, finding an allotment, pick your own farm. Basically, we're blaming it on the parents. We're saying get to it. It's down to the parents. It's not down to the school to educate.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. A lot of parents seem to think that the school can just deal with that part of bringing them up, but actually it's at home really where you get to know new cuisine and all of that. Thank you very much indeed for coming into the studio, parenting journalist Annette Kello. Thank you very much. Right, well, it's now 1:50 and we can head back to Liverpool and speak to Tom Harwood. Tom, just seeing the breaking news, actually, that Michael Gove has been hired as the editor of The Spectator magazine.
Yes, Michael Gove is back in the fore in terms of having one of these jobs that will be a public-facing role. Of course, he was a journalist for many years before he became a Member of Parliament back in 2005 for Surrey Heath, then one of the safest Conservative seats in the country, now held, of course, by the Labour Party. But Michael Gove chose to stand down at the last election. But he's always been a fairly prominent voice, of course, on the Conservative side of politics in the United Kingdom. When he was briefly out of cabinet when Theresa May first became Prime Minister, he took up a column with The Times, his former newspaper. So I think many people were expecting that Michael Gove would have a role in print journalism in one form or another. I'm not sure how many people were expecting, however, that would be as editor of The Spectator, replacing Fraser Nelson, who held the role for 15 years, I believe the longest serving editor of The Spectator in that magazine's history. And of course, many people call The Spectator the Tory Bible. It is a very important, influential publication. It will be interesting to see how this new editorship, Michael Gove in his role of steering that debate, how that changes, how that develops going forward. He's due to take on the role in just 2 weeks' time, shortly after the Conservative conference finishes.
Very interesting indeed. We'll keep our eyes on that story as it developed. But in other news, Keir Starmer, this winter fuel vote at the Labour conference that was taken a little bit earlier. How significant is that loss? The fact that Labour members, including the union representatives who back the Labour Party in government, that they voted against what has become a keynote policy.
Yes, it shows a real sense of disquiet, a real sense of unease. Not just, of course, the opposition benches in the Houses of Parliament that are opposing the Labour Party on this policy, not just the Conservative Party, which has put posters up around Liverpool, around this conference venue, trying to shame the Labour Party about this policy, but it's also, of course, people within the hall. It's delegates at the Labour Party conference, and we learn this this afternoon, or just this morning when the vote was, that it's a majority of delegates at this conference that oppose the Labour government on this policy. However, the vote was non-binding. This isn't going to change the policy of the government, but it will indeed shame the government.
And Tom, just very quickly while I've got you, reading that Britain's economic growth forecasts have been revised up sharply ahead of the budget next month. Your thoughts on that?
Yes, this is good wiggle room for the Chancellor, but of course we're expecting various different changes to policy. It's been widely trailed that there will be tax increases despite the increase in growth forecasts. I think if I were a betting man, I'd say that this wiggle room that the Chancellor has found with the surprisingly stronger economy that was bequeathed to this government by the last government, it's more likely that this Chancellor Chancellor will use that on spending increases than tax cuts.
Yes, and Rishi Sunak, I believe, on social media has already taken credit for that, for the revising up of economic forecasts. Thank you very much indeed, Tom Harwood, our deputy political editor there at the Liverpool conference for the Labour Party. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. We are going to be checking in with our political editor, Christopher Hope, who's been in the United States with Keir Starmer.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest forecast for GB News from the Met Office. It's a fine start in the north today, but it is turning increasingly cloudy with outbreaks of rain turning up from the southwest because low pressure is arriving from the Atlantic. That low taking a southward path across the UK, and so it's already turning wet across Wales and the southwest. And those outbreaks of rain are steadily moving northeastwards through the day, reaching London and the southeast by the mid-afternoon, parts of Northern Ireland likewise. Meanwhile, northern and some parts of eastern England staying largely dry with some cloud. Showers for northern Scotland and a cold wind here. And that's where it's going to stay here for the next few days. But further south, well, we've got that rain to end things on Wednesday. Some brighter skies returning to Cornwall and Devon, but across much of Wales, the Midlands into the southeast, it's a damp evening rush hour. Northern Ireland, parts of northwest England, southwest Scotland also seeing the cloud and rain turning up by this stage. But northern Scotland, a mix of bright spells and showers as we go into the evening. Now, the rain in the south will steadily journey north, and then it will tend to stall across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and northern England, as well as North Wales overnight. The rain will be heaviest for northeast England, and it will be accumulating significantly through Thursday, with the risk of 80 millimetres in places, particularly over the likes of the North York Moors and parts of the Pennines. That could cause some issues first thing Thursday, tricky travel conditions and the risk of localised flooding. Further south, things do brighten up through Thursday morning, but there'll be some heavy, potentially thundery showers across the south and southeast. In Scotland, as well as Northern Ireland, things do brighten up, and we'll see a mixture of sunny spells with some scattered showers in the far north.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Desning luck.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 25th of September. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood, live as the Labour Party conference concludes.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, leave Lebanon now. The Prime Minister demands Britons evacuate immediately as the conflict in the Middle East escalates. And yes, it's yet another Labour donation blunder. The Prime Minister, turns out he accepted accommodation worth over £20,000 from guess who? Lord Ali. Asked why he did this, Starmer said it was to help his teenage son peacefully study for his GCSEs. And Met badge outrage. Metropolitan police officers have been banned from wearing a badge that commemorates hero cops killed in the line of duty. Why was it banned? Well, Tom, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you, what was your highlight and low light of the Labour conference?
Oh, Emily, that's a big question. I have to say, probably a highlight was last night watching the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, attempt some karaoke on the stage at the Mirror Party. That was something that will, I think, stay in my mind for a long time. Low lights, my goodness me, hard to suggest. I actually... this sounds too mean, but yesterday I had to wake up very early to help step in and host a panel discussion, that was a fantastic panel discussion. It was on AI, one of my favourite things in the world.
Yes.
So it was a privilege to do, but my goodness me, it started far too early in the morning.
Oh, these are all the things I know nothing about. Me in Paddington, no idea that you were doing panels on artificial intelligence, but there you go. You're very much wanted, aren't you? You're in demand, Tom Harwood. We'll catch up with you in a little bit. And please do at home get in touch as well. Post your comments visiting gbnews.com/your say. That is the way to get in touch. But first, let's get to the news headlines.
Emily, thank you very much and good afternoon. The top stories this hour. Labour has reaffirmed its decision to cut the winter fuel payment after party delegates voted for the government to reverse its controversial move.
Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel!
While there's nothing binding about the vote, it puts further pressure on the Labour government over its decision to take away the benefit from millions of pensioners. The motion was put forward by the Unite union, which has accused the government of embarking on austerity Mark II. Whilst it's a step in the right direction, Unite Union's General Secretary Sharon Graham told GB News the vote should have happened sooner.
Well, look, I think this vote should have happened on Tuesday. I mean, the vote was down under the economy debate on Tuesday, and I think it is disrespectful to the issue that we weren't hearing that vote earlier on under the economy debate. Look, the reality here is that they're going to have to reverse this allowance in terms of putting it back into the pockets of pensioners, and we're asking them to do that. I disagree with what the Prime Minister is saying on this. I'm really glad we've got a Labour government. I think Britain is better off with a Labour government, but on this issue, it is a huge misstep, and he needs to change what he has done. And I think the country out there, it's not really what happens in this hall that's important, it's what's happening there in the real world. They are furious about it.
Meanwhile, the Health Secretary Wes Streeting has told the Labour Party conference on its fourth and final day that the NHS is letting people down as he promised to defend it as a public service.
I know the doctor's diagnosis can sometimes be hard to hear. But if you don't have an accurate diagnosis, you won't provide the correct prescription. And when you put protecting the reputation of the NHS above protecting patients, you're not helping the NHS, you're killing it with kindness. So I say respectfully, but unequivocally, I won't back down. The NHS is broken, but it's not beaten, and together we will turn it around.
The RMT union has announced that rail workers have voted overwhelmingly to accept pay offers from train companies and Network Rail. Members of the RMT union backed a one-year rise of 4.5% at Network Rail and increases at train operators of 4.75% for the last year and 4.5% for this year and next. Almost 99% of train company members voted in favour, while Network Rail workers backed their pay rise by 88%. The RMT said the ballot results mean that the long-running national rail dispute is now over. The Prime Minister's told Britons in Lebanon to leave immediately as around 700 UK troops are deployed to Cyprus to oversee an emergency evacuation. It says Sir Keir Starmer's in New York for the UN General Assembly. Warning sirens sounded in Tel Aviv this morning as a missile was intercepted by air defence systems after it was detected from crossing from Lebanon. Terror group Hezbollah has confirmed it launched a rocket targeting Mossad headquarters near Israel's capital. Hezbollah says the Mossad's responsible for assassinating leaders and blowing up pagers and walkie-talkies in Lebanon, a claim which has been denied by the Israeli president. More than 500 people, including women and children, have been killed in the past 24 hours. In other news, the Prime Minister suggested he accepted £20,000 in donations for accommodation because his son needed somewhere to revise for his GCSEs while his family home was besieged by journalists during the election campaign. Sir Keir defended his decision to take gifts from Labour peer Lord Ali amid criticism, saying he was not going to apologise for not doing anything wrong. And he also said the freebies didn't cost the taxpayer a penny. Sir Keir signalled he could continue to accept hospitality from donors, saying it was a matter of judgment for individual MPs. Now, the Police Memorial Trust has unveiled a specially commissioned memorial stone dedicated to the memory of Police Sergeant Matt Ratner of the Metropolitan Police Service. Sergeant Ratner, a New Zealand-born British police officer, was shot and killed in Croydon Custody Centre in 2020. The officer was nearing retirement, having served nearly 30 years in the police. Louis de Soysa opened fire on him at the Croydon Custody Suite. De Soysa had earlier been arrested and searched, but officers failed to find the gun that the 26-year-old had hidden in an underarm holster despite discovering bullets in his pocket. Philip Schofield has announced he will return to television 16 months after his departure from ITV's This Morning. The former TV star will appear on a Channel 5 special called Castaway. In a post on Instagram, he said, "Now you know how I spent my summer, alone for 10 days, no food, no water, no crew." The 62-year-old resigned from ITV last May after he admitted to a, quote, unwise but not illegal affair with a younger male colleague. And a new weather warning for heavy rain has been issued by the Met Office, which could cause further widespread flooding and travel disruption. The yellow warning has been issued for much of England and Wales, parts of the West Midlands and the northwest of England between 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon and 10 a.m. on Friday. The Met Office says there's some uncertainty in the details of this warning, but some areas could see up to 30 millimetres of rain in 2 to 3 hours. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is now 2:08. And Sir Keir Starmer, he's making his UN debut as Prime Minister in New York today, where he's expected to promise global leadership as tensions in the Middle East continue to flare up and the bloody war in Ukraine grinds on. Now, Sir Keir Starmer is also hoping to have meetings with US presidential candidates Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, with the election just over a month away. Well, let's go live to New York now and speak to GB News political editor Christopher Hope, who's been with the Prime Minister. Christopher, please detail what Keir Starmer is set to do in New York over the next couple of days. And you spoke to him on the flight, didn't you?
That's right. Hi, Emily. Welcome to New York City, where it's breakfast time here. So Keir Starmer is here. He's in New York. He's doing meetings all day. We're expecting meetings later with world leaders ahead of speaking to the UN General Assembly tomorrow afternoon. He's got a meeting with the Security Council. It's quite a big gear change from what Tom was describing in Liverpool, where of course he's had a real blow to him and his own authority with the party members voting against his controversial plan to withdraw winter fuel benefits from 10 million pensioners. So he's doing interviews with journalists here. He's spoken to me for GB News, and that interview will run at 5 p.m. tonight on GB News, so do try and stay tuned for that if you can.
Not quite
that's
yet.
Right. Overnight he's changed gear, and not quite yet, Emily, but overnight he's changed gear, and the government has ordered UK nationals to leave for Lebanon. They have got 2 warships in the region. They're very, very concerned about the Hezbollah fighters and Israeli troops exchanging fire. You're seeing from the images on GB News bulletins, really worrying, and it's escalating there. And I think quite quickly the focus for the Prime Minister is going into keeping the peace globally. And Zelensky's here, he's talking about his own victory plan. He wants to get support of that from the outgoing US President Joe Biden. And there's even an off chance, we're told, he may want to try and meet with maybe Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, the two candidates to try and succeed Joe Biden. So as ever in politics, in life, when you're Prime Minister, it comes at you very quickly.
And Christopher, Keir Starmer, he was forced to comment on one of his ministers' comments about Donald Trump, wasn't he? Was there a little bit of a row?
Yes, he kind of swerved that one. That was Angela Regal, who's the Home Affairs, Home Office Minister. She spoke about the language. She would say it was racist language, fueling division on the street. She blamed Trump for that. That got short shrift from the Trump spokesman. And when asked about that on the flight over here, Sir Keir Starmer avoided getting into a row between Donald Trump and one of his ministers, but said that he's any kind of language which fuels hatred on the streets, he's against. But as ever, he's treading a very delicate line, Sir Keir Starmer, and you'll see more answers to more difficult questions on GB News at 5 p.m.
Well, fantastic. We've been talking quite a bit about this latest in the freebie scandal engulfing the Prime Minister, particularly this £20,000 for accommodation gifted by, guess who? Yeah. Lord Ali. Again, the excuse this time is that his son needed to be peaceful when he was studying for his GCSEs, so he needed to use this £18 million penthouse.
That's right, Emily. He's very protective of his children. We don't know, they are not named publicly. But he did say today, I thought surprisingly, he brought his son into the conversation, saying that he accepted this donation. It was a free use of a flat. It's been valued at £20,000 of benefit to him. So his family, and particularly his son, can have some peace in the maelstrom of a general election campaign. Any parent would understand that. Some might wonder, could you not have found someone like a relation, a neighbour, someone out the public eye where his son could have done revision? Instead, he did take the benefit of Lord Ali's £20,000 donation. He's been pressed on that again in New York. So he tried to move on from the issue of freebies, spectacles, clothing for his wife and other senior cabinet ministers, but it keeps coming back to get to him. And I wonder whether he may think, may start to wonder whether he should be giving away freebies in the same way we heard from Emma Lule-Buck, this rather admirable MP from South Shields, a Labour MP. She said when she gets sent freebies, she gives them away to charity, or they go back where they came from. I wonder whether that's where this story is going.
Well, perhaps, Christopher. Just lastly, there has been a little bit of criticism from some quarters that Keir Starmer and the new Labour government haven't been as vocal with their support of Ukraine, haven't promised perhaps as much as Conservative Prime Ministers, particularly Boris Johnson, have in the past. Will Keir Starmer be very much banging the drum to continue support for Ukraine?
He will do. I think that would definitely be denied by the team around Keir Starmer. They are clear to us when they speak to us. They are full square behind Zelensky. We are very generous as a country donating arms. They're trying to get behind this victory plan. The issue of Storm Shadow missiles, the reason why they haven't been sanctioned to use against Russia or in Russia. The UK has withheld support for that, and also there's a requirement for US guidance systems to be approved first, or else they can't hit their targets. So the UK and the US are working together, but I would say there's been no difference in our commitment to supporting Ukraine as a country from the Tories to Labour.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed. I'm looking forward to that interview with Sir Keir Starmer a little bit later on, 5 o'clock, during Martin Dobney's show. So definitely stay tuned for that, Christopher. Thank you very much indeed. There's Christopher Hope in New York City. But let's return to Tom Harwood in the just as glamorous location of Liverpool, outside the Labour Party conference there. Just hearing from Christopher about Keir Starmer's trip to the United States, his trip to New York. He'll be wanting to forget about the scandal, the freebie gate, the winter fuel allowance vote that's been going on while he's been in the United Kingdom and while he's been on that flight to the United States as well, and turn his attention to presenting himself on the international stage.
He certainly will, and it's been an advantageous trip, just from its timing, given that Keir Starmer left this conference yesterday after his speech, and thereby avoided the vote that happened today, where the conference roundly condemned the government for its decision to remove winter fuel allowance from most pensioners. Now, this is, of course, clearly a split in the Labour Party. You can see that there is real anger from delegates around this decision from the government. So Keir Starmer, being 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, or indeed several thousand miles across the Atlantic by the time that vote happened, is clearly an advantageous position to be in, avoiding the repercussions of that vote. A non-binding vote, though it was, still a big moral condemnation of the government's decided chosen path.
And presumably at these meetings in New York, he'll want to put across two themes quite strongly. Firstly, that we remain 100% committed to Ukraine and its defence, but also that question of de-escalation in the Middle East.
Certainly, and the Middle East has weighed heavy as an issue here in the Labour Party conference over the last few days. Of course, we saw multiple hecklers, both for the Prime Minister and for the Chancellor, on the issue of Gaza. Clearly, this is a position that the Labour Party has found very difficult to handle. On the one hand, the Labour Party has been going to say, on the one hand, the Labour Party has been saying that they're going to withdraw arms sales from Israel. Clearly, the Labour Party has been not saying that they will do all of that, and thereby, in so doing, they have annoyed both sides of this particular debate.
Yes, indeed. Well, Tom Harwood, thank you very much indeed. I'll leave you there in Liverpool for the moment. Tom Harwood there, thank you very much. Right, well, tensions, as we mentioned, continue to increase in the Middle East as Israel's Iron Dome is forced to intercept missiles fired by Hezbollah. After thousands of pagers and walkie-talkies unexpectedly exploded in Lebanon, Israel launched its biggest offensive yet on the country. Now thousands of British nationals in the area are being told to leave immediately. Well, let's get the thoughts now of former chairman of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood. Tobias, thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon. It's a very worrying time for those watching what's happening in the Middle East and for those living in both Israel and Lebanon. Keir Starmer, he's had a very important meeting today in the United States. What message should he be trying to get across?
Yeah, I mean, fascinating that President Zelensky is there in New York at the UN General Assembly, hoping to secure those longer-range weapon systems from the West, but his plea is being overshadowed by these unfolding events in the Middle East. And on current trajectory, it's very sad to say, the Middle East is sliding towards war. And this is a combination of factors, a perfect storm of instability. No country, no single stakeholder in charge. Israel has got its mighty military strength, used it in Gaza, but with the absence of a long-term strategy. What is the effort to make a ceasefire? What's going to happen with security and governments afterwards? It's still not clear. And now Hezbollah, which, don't forget, is the most heavily armed non-state actor in the world, supported by Iran, has ratcheted up its attacks from southern Lebanon. And of course, this has prompted Israel to understandably retaliate. And it now looks like they may indeed invade southern Lebanon as well, as Israel's now made securing the north of its country and returning the citizens there a war aim. But Hezbollah still seem committed to continue their attacks until there is a ceasefire in Gaza. So you have Iran. What will they do next? The United States seems to be, that could be so influential, seems to be distracted by presidential elections. And of course, the UN itself, they're usually the custodians of international security, is completely paralyzed. What sits behind Hezbollah and Hamas is, of course, Iran. And what now sits behind Iran is Russia. And of course, they're going to veto any proposal that might be put forward to the UN General Assembly. So the prospects of further escalation are serious. It's quite right that the British government instructs all Britons to leave and task military assets there. We don't want to see a repeat of the chaos that we saw in Kabul in the evacuation there back in August 2021.
Well, absolutely. Keir Starmer, understandably, is saying that he's very worried about the escalation in Lebanon. He's calling for all parties to step back from the brink and de-escalate. We hear a lot of that word, de-escalate. What are the chances that we will see this situation de-escalate?
Not for the moment. I mean, it'll be very interesting to hear what Prime Minister Netanyahu says at the UN General Assembly. He's there. He's going to attend on Friday. But we still have this elusive ceasefire in Gaza to pursue, and of course this new instability in northern Israel, southern Lebanon. There is a ceasefire resolution there actually for the Lebanese, UN Resolution 1701. This was a framework from a previous encounter mandating the withdrawal of Hezbollah forces to the Litani River, which is about 30 kilometers in. But Hezbollah currently refuses to do so until Israel withdraws from Gaza. So what happens at the UN, and the Prime Minister will be doing this, is the bilaterals, the behind-the-scenes discussions. That's where perhaps the West can collectively work together, put pressure on Israel and indeed the other side to de-escalate, come around the table and try and sort out a longer-term solution. But right now, that does look pretty grim.
And Tobias, I must ask, what are your thoughts when you hear Benjamin Netanyahu say that Sir Keir Starmer has been misguided and that he's undermined the Israeli state and that the arms embargo or partial arms embargo sends a horrible message to Hamas? Is he right?
Well, there's a lot of internal Israeli politics at play here, a lot of friction at the highest ranks in the politics as well as in the military as well. And I'm afraid this does play out a bit with the rhetoric that comes out. There has been a frustration by the international community in the way that Israel is using its superior military might. I touched on it earlier. What is the strategy? Where do these tactics go? You've charged into Gaza. It's now pretty much broken. What are the next steps? How are we going to get those hostages back? These are the questions that everybody's asking Prime Minister Netanyahu. And now this second front has opened up. Where does it all lead? Using your superior military force. These are the questions that I hope Israel can provide answers to, because only then can we help Israel defend itself.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it. Tobias Ellwood, former chairman of the Defence Select Committee. Thank you very much indeed. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, he delivered a speech today about how he's going to reform and improve our ailing NHS. What might that look like?
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
My next guest is a composer and film director whose musical journey began at the tender age of 4.5 when he started playing the piano. Under the tutelage of luminaries such as Sir George Benjamin and Sir Harrison Birtwistle, he has honed his craft, primarily grounding himself in the classical world. He's written music in sets of composition in the 24 major and minor keys of the chromatic scale, producing an album which is accompanied by 24 videos, and it's called 24. I'm joined now by Fabio D'Andrea. Fabio, great to see you. Tell me a little bit, I'm a layman when it comes to music, tell me a little bit about how a composer chooses a key and what it means to the composer to have chosen the key.
Sure. Well, I think every musical key, and there's 24 of them, major and minor, they have their own feel.
So you could play a piece in, say, C major, which is normally regarded as the simple key. It's all the white notes on the piano. But if you play that piece, say, in A flat major, it's going to have a very different feel. So I decided to create this project, 24 pieces, again, looking back at our traditions and the history of what composers have done in the past, especially in regards to piano music, and explore every key, see if I could bring out the emotion that you feel from that actual key itself.
Were you fonder of some than others? I imagine, for example, you're not so fond of C because it's too straightforward.
Actually, no, I love all of them. And that's the beauty of music. Every key has its own feel. And some keys are associated with different feelings. So, for example, C major has actually been historically associated with victory. It's quite a victorious feel about it. I love D flat major. That's quite mellow. But every key has its own special feeling. And sometimes something will just sound different in that one key, and it's meant to be in that key. So for me, this has been a whole exploration of that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The king of breakfast TV is back. That's right. Britain's favourite TV host, Eamon Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 2:26. Now, NHS leaders have voiced growing concerns over the government's broken messaging, warning that it could harm patients' confidence and staff morale. Yes, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting's repeated use of the term broken to describe the NHS, along with claims about cancer and maternity care, has sparked unease within the service. I mean, I think you can understand why. Morale is already low. If you keep saying the NHS is broken, the NHS is broken, it needs reform, it's not saving enough lives, you might see how that might be quite damaging, perhaps, to morale, even if perhaps it's true. Well, joining me now to discuss this is former chairman of the NHS Trust, Roy Lilly. Roy, do you think there's something in that if you continuously say how dreadful the NHS is, how it's in need of so much reform, how it's not saving enough people's lives, how cancer patients are being left to wait for huge lengths of time, that actually it might make the NHS a bit worse in terms of staff morale?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, all of that list that you've just gone through is true. I mean, the NHS has accumulated a whole load of problems, following 10 years of austerity, the COVID experience, the big reforms that Andrew Lansley, the former Secretary of State for Health, Tory, introduced. I mean, there's no question about it. The NHS is in a mess.
Right. You do know the NHS was ring-fenced. It didn't experience austerity and cuts in the same way as other departments. It was ring-fenced throughout. It may not have risen.
If you want to take me on the numbers, the figures were 1%, 1.2%, 1.25%, and for 10 years it was under 2%, when it normally needs, from 1948 to today, the average is 3.78%. It needs about 4% a year to keep its head above water. During that 10 years, it had under 2%, and that's when we didn't recruit enough people, buy enough kit, do enough innovation stuff and all of the rest of it, and now the chickens are coming home to roost. So we know where we are. And I think, to say the NHS was broken during the sort of election campaign, it was sort of the hyperbole of the election, and it was a nice soundbite and it was okay. But what I think Streeting and others have got to realise now, they are the government. They are the employers of 1.4 million people who they are going to have to rely on to sort the NHS out. They can come up with whatever policy they want. They can come up with more money or less, and they can come up with more ideas or fewer. But at the end of the day, it's the goodwill of the people working in the NHS that's going to turn it round. And I don't know anybody working in the NHS who doesn't really want to turn the NHS round. I mean, they all know they've got clunky IT to work with. They all know there are 7.6 million people waiting for treatment, many of whom will be their neighbours and friends and relatives. They know the position they're in. But to get somebody like Streeting to keep saying it, I mean, he said it at the party conference. I don't know if you've seen his speech. He was kind of red meat for the Labour faithful. You know, he had a go at the Tories and they all cheered, and he said it's all dreadful and they all cheered. But I think what we need now is a maturity and an understanding for a group of people who've never been in government, and it's been okay for them to sort of run their mouths off and say whatever it is they want when you're in opposition. Now you're the government, you've got to be a bit more mature about life. And I think that's really where we're at.
Yeah, he's trying to play good cop, bad cop, I think. I mean, he did warn in his speech against what he called killing the NHS with kindness. What do you take from that? What do you think he means there?
I think, in fairness to him, there's some reality in that. I mean, I think it is important that we don't keep saying the NHS is wonderful and everything's going to be all right, and it's not. I mean, and people understand it's not. You've only got to look at the waiting list. I mean, Labour have got one job. Their one job is to reduce waiting lists, and we really don't have a viable policy of how they're going to do it. But so it's not okay to keep saying the NHS is wonderful, and it's not okay to keep saying that everything's going to be okay. What it is fair to say is that they've accumulated a huge load of problems that they're trying to work through. Winter is coming, where God knows what's going to happen this winter with that number of people on the waiting list. If we get a bad winter, you and I are going to be back talking about pictures of ambulances queuing up outside the hospitals again. I mean, they really do now have to roll their sleeves up and get going with some proper policy, some targeted funded, and get ready for what's to come. It's okay. The election's over. They've had their fun. Now let's get on with it. Pedal to the metal. Let's make sure the NHS is ready. And part of that is getting the mindset of the people working in the NHS, knowing that their boss, in inverted commas, is there to help them. I wrote a piece the other day where I said, I've seen about nearly 30, I think it is, NHS Health Secretaries of State for Health. And I've gone back over them and I've tried to think of the number of times the Secretary of State said, I'm the Secretary of State for Health, and how can I help? And I can only remember one of them saying, and that was a Labour member that said that, I'm here to help you. And that's really
also, Roy, all of these very well-paid NHS executives, managers, they need to roll up their sleeves too. It can't be all on Wes Streeting's shoulders. He is one man. He is just part of the government. He's not working on the NHS, in the NHS day-to-day, managing all of that as well. Roy Lilly, thank you. Always great.
I agree with that. And if you look at the Darsley report that's just come out that was very critical of the NHS, one of the things it does say is the NHS doesn't have enough managers. Less than 2% of the staff in the NHS are NHS managers, and if you make comparisons across Europe, you'll find that they're 8-9%.
It's very interesting you make that point, because a lot of people would say, "Oh, there's too many managers. There's too much bureaucracy in that respect." But you're not the first person to make that point, and you won't be the last. Tom Harwood, my co-host, usually he always makes that point. Actually, we should have more managers, not fewer. Thank you very much indeed, Roy Lilly. Thank you, former chairman of NHS Trust. Thank you very much indeed for your time. I agree with Roy Lilly on quite a lot there. Apart from, I'm not sure you can continue to put 4% more into the NHS every single year. I mean, where's the money coming from? If our economy isn't growing, just more and more of our GDP, national income on the health service, is that sustainable? Anyway, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. We are going to get to the story that the Met Police have banned a specific badge for police to wear. I'll reveal which badge and why after this.
Emily, thank you. The top stories. Labour has reaffirmed its decision to cut the winter fuel payment after party delegates voted for the government to reverse the move.
Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel! Save the
While there's nothing binding about the vote, it puts further pressure on the government over its decision to take away the benefit from millions of pensioners. The motion was put forward by the Unite Union, which has accused the government of embarking on austerity Mark II. Whilst it's a step in the right direction, Unite Union's General Secretary Sharon Graham earlier said the vote should have happened sooner. The Health Secretary has told the Labour Party conference on its fourth and final day the NHS is letting people down, as he promised to defend it as a public service.
I know the doctor's diagnosis can sometimes be hard to hear, but if you don't have an accurate diagnosis, you won't provide the correct prescription. And when you put protecting the reputation of the NHS above protecting patients, you're not helping the NHS, you're killing it with kindness. So I say respectfully, but unequivocally, I won't back down. The NHS is broken, but it's not beaten, and together we will turn it around.
And the RMT union has announced that rail workers have voted overwhelmingly to accept pay offers from train companies and Network Rail. Members of the RMT union backed a one-year rise of 4.5% at Network Rail and increases at train operators of 4.75% for the last year and 4.5% for this year and next. Almost 99% of train company members voted in favour, while Network Rail workers backed their pay rise by 88%. The RMT said the ballot results mean that the long-running national rail dispute is now over. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. There's more news in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there and welcome to the latest forecast for GB News from the Met Office. It's a fine start in the north today, but it is turning increasingly cloudy with outbreaks of rain turning up from the southwest because low pressure is arriving from the Atlantic. That low taking a southward path across the UK, and so it's already turning wet across Wales and the southwest. And those outbreaks of rain are steadily moving northeastwards through the day, reaching London and the southeast by the mid-afternoon, parts of Northern Ireland likewise. Meanwhile, northern and some parts of eastern England staying largely dry with some cloud. Showers for northern Scotland and a cold wind here. And that's where it's going to stay here for the next few days. But further south, well, we've got that rain to end things on Wednesday. Some brighter skies returning to Cornwall and Devon, but across much of Wales, the Midlands into the southeast, it's a damp evening rush hour. Northern Ireland, parts of northwest England, southwest Scotland also seeing the cloud and rain turning up by this stage. But northern Scotland, a mix of bright spells and showers as we go into the evening. Now, the rain in the south will steadily journey north and then it will tend to stall across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and northern England as well as North Wales overnight. The rain will be heaviest for northeast England and it will be accumulating significantly through Thursday with the risk of 80 millimetres in places, particularly over the likes of the North York Moors and parts of the Pennines. That could cause some issues first thing Thursday, tricky travel conditions and the risk of localised flooding. Further south, things do brighten up through Thursday morning, but there'll be some heavy, potentially thundery showers across the south and southeast. In Scotland, as well as Northern Ireland, things do brighten up, and we'll see a mixture of sunny spells with some scattered showers in the far north.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. There's queues in the West Midlands, the southbound M5 junction to Oldbury and Dudley towards Birmingham at junction 3. Now, 2 lanes coned off there. A collision causing delays. Routes through Oldbury and Smethwick are looking quite slow. The queue southbound is back towards West Brom at junction 1. A few issues either side of the M25 this lunchtime. Clockwise 16 to Maple Cross at 17, about a mile before junction 17. Lane 1's coned off. An earlier collision there causing queues being recovered. covered. A bump clockwise too before Brentwood 28 now on the hard shoulder. A little bit slow on the approach. Anti-clock at the Dartford Tunnel. The left-hand tunnel shut for a breakdown. That's causing queues. And the northbound M11 in Essex just after the M25 at 6. A lane shutting queues. They're back towards the anti-clock M25. There's emergency repairs.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 2:39. Now, police officers have expressed their anger at what they're calling an insulting decision by the Metropolitan Police to ban them from wearing badges that honour fellow officers who've been killed in the line of duty. Now, the thin blue line emblem is worn as a mark of remembrance and respect for those who have paid the ultimate price to maintain law and order. But the Met Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has recently introduced a hardline ban on officers wearing any badges, lanyards or patches which advertise causes, beliefs or charities. Right, well, GBNews national reporter Charlie Peters joins us now. I mean, with this rule on badges and lanyards, you can understand it when it's political issues. You can understand it when it's the sort of LGBT or pro-Palestine or whatever else it is. The police need to be very neutral when it comes. I'm not sure this was what they had in mind when they were talking about this ban.
I think some commentators and critics might ask the Met, did you come down hard on police officers who took the knee during the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020? Or is this a only in one direction sort of ban on coppers wearing badges? And I have to say, speaking to some police officers this morning at a memorial I attended for a sergeant who was killed 4 years ago, people didn't want to touch on this issue, as you can imagine, but in the wider policing community, people have spoken to me about the timing being especially bad. They're making this edict, this new announcement in the last week, just as this memorial has gone on and taken place. And I attended it this morning, a very solemn and sober experience. And Rick Pryor, who's the chairman of the Met Police Federation, who represents police officers, said officers will be extremely saddened and angry to hear this news. He went on to say the families of officers who have made the ultimate sacrifice to keep the public safe will be equally dismayed. I urge the Commissioner to urgently reconsider this decision. But at the same time, I actually spoke to another police officer this morning, obviously on the condition of anonymity, and they told me that this decision was good. They say it's not uniform. Wearing pin badges on the cloth of the country, the policing uniform, looks shabby. And they went on to say that the thin blue line badge in particular is a bit of an Americanism, and it's of the worst kind of Americanisms. They said it perpetuates a sort of victim mentality among coppers, where they say, we're doing the hardest job in the world, etc., etc. But in reaction to that, I mean, I attended this memorial.
Who said that about it perpetuating a victim mentality?
A police officer I spoke to. I'm not going to name them, Emily, because they're a serving copper. But when I went to this memorial today, I did hear a lot of testimony from police officers about how this is one of the hardest jobs in the world. We send police officers into danger every day with little more than a taser, if they're lucky, and some cuffs, and expect them to do all the duties that they are required. It is enormously dangerous. Sergeant Matt Ratana, who was killed 4 years ago today, was shot in the custody suite, shot through the heart by a man now serving a whole life order. He'll never be released from prison. So it was right and quite beautiful, actually, today to honour his service and his sacrifice after 30 years in the Met. He was born in New Zealand. There was a Maori tribute act and a haka was performed. But to have that memorial go on at the same time as the Met is fighting back against claims made by the Policing Federation that officers will be saddened that they can't remember their fallen comrades who could be wearing that thin blue line badge, it's not great timing for them. In their defence, the police have said, straight up, impartiality is key. Maintaining the confidence of all the communities we serve, that's a vital part of their work. They say, with a lot of engagement, both formal and informal groups, they've updated their uniform policy. There are some exceptions, 2 exceptions, in fact, to this policy. That's the Red Hague Poppy, which will come out in November, of course, and the police memorial badge during respective periods. But the thin blue line, a lot of police officers, you'll see them in London all the time, still wearing it. That'll change now, of course, throughout the year as a constant commemoration and a maintaining of that sense of memorial for police officers who've been killed in the line of duty. That's going to be scrapped. That can't be worn any longer.
It's very interesting that there are two such distinct views on this, that some feel that the badge actually perpetuates a type of victim mentality among police officers, and others think it is very much their right and perhaps a duty also to wear these badges to show that camaraderie and remembrance too. But does this feed into the idea that the police in general or police officers aren't feeling backed up enough? We've heard stories about how police have been handing in their tasers and the like. They've sort of given up. They feel under attack sometimes.
Well, there's no doubt that there's no shortage, isn't there, really, of testimony from anonymous police officers, some of which we've just heard, about the levels of distress and, as you have suggested, disrespect that they feel from seniors and also often from members of the public. I mean, let's not forget, this is an enormously dangerous job. I mean, a lot of police officers suffer extreme injuries and violence quite regularly in their roles. I always think when I'm asked to speak about policing experiences that the average human being will have a handful of traumatic experiences in their lives. Police officers are expected to have dozens, if not hundreds, of traumatic experiences throughout their careers. And we expect these people to get back to their borough command unit at the end of the day, get to the police station, get to the nick, put it all in a locker and go home, and that's it. So I think there is as you'd expect, a sense of camaraderie among police officers, and that they want to express that through a symbol for remembering those who have fallen in the line of duty is entirely understandable. But the Met still thinks that it is a potentially partial expression. And also there is this criticism I've heard this morning, as I said, Emily, about it being shabby, that it reduces the uniformity and the quality of how Metropolitan Police officers present themselves. I have to say I saw some fabulous drill this morning by police officers on duty at that memorial service. They were uniform and they looked pristine. If one of them was wearing a thin blue line badge, I think it probably would have affected the quality of that demonstration, such as marching as they were in uniform and also almost in a military fashion. A couple of those on display were wearing operational service medals from tours that they've obviously been on before they joined the police. Now, in the military, of course, you can't just wear a badge whenever you want, and this is a similar sort of approach that they're bringing forward.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that they're clamping down on this badge when we have... all of us have seen that the police officers, when they have been dancing, sort of helping protesters,
of course,
or, doing all this type of thing. It's interesting that they decide to clamp down on this one.
I would say,
very quickly, Charlie.
Some people don't know what is political. I think the police quite often would suggest that those symbols, like you're saying, the LGBT flag, is not a political symbol, but there are plenty of people who say there's a lot of politics and a lot of personal views involved in that as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much indeed, Charlie, for bringing us that story. GB News national reporter. This is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show, including the Princess of Wales, Catherine. She's preparing for the Christmas Carol concert. More on that after this break.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Shakespeare play is axed after director refused to remove pro-transgender and pro-Palestine references in new take on A Midsummer Night's Dream. I went to see A Midsummer Night's Dream at Kew Gardens this summer, and it was brilliant, and they didn't touch it. They just left it as it is. And really, when you look at the plot of A Midsummer Night's Dream, it's essentially about sexual assault by today's standards. There's a lot of...
You mean bottom and all that?
Yeah, giving people potions so they'll do things they wouldn't have done otherwise. And I thought
I was enamoured of an ass.
Yeah, exactly. And but they didn't alter the script, and it was brilliant, and I thought it was really, really good. On the other hand, this director, Steph O'Driscoll, known for her work in London's Royal Court Theatre, had a bit of an issue because she's put some very political stuff into her version. And, of course, I would argue for her in that she can do whatever she likes. I'm all for creative freedom. But there comes a point where you're like, well, is it still Shakespeare then?
Yeah.
His version definitely wasn't pro-Palestine.
Yeah, I don't remember the pro-Palestine, pro-trans bit.
But the truth is these two things do not go together, trans right and free Palestine. I think the Gazan people are not so gung-ho trans rights stuff.
How dare you, Luke?
So,
Queers for Palestine is a legitimate movement.
But even if it isn't, she's allowed to make something that's incoherent to you. Sometimes you make things that are incoherent to other people.
And you know what? The people out there hear what I say.
Because so the management, the one thing I sympathise with is that they tried to shut it down after the preview. They said you've had all these months, and then they saw one preview and they sort of, whoever was running it went, well, change all that. And they were like, well, no, it's too late. You could have changed it at any point. Yeah. And the director walked out and the whole thing just fell apart, right?
Well, you don't know what the real thing is. It might be that this is how they get attention for the play. Now we're paying attention to this, and we're all going to go to this theatre in Manchester.
We're totally going to watch it all together.
So cynical.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's been reported today that Princess Catherine is planning for her long-awaited return to public duties. Now, earlier this month, the Princess of Wales, she gave us all an update on her cancer treatment. She told us her course of chemotherapy had been completed. And now, according to new reports, she's holding meetings to plan the annual Westminster Abbey Carol concert. Well, joining us now is royal broadcaster Helena Chard. Helena, thank you very much indeed. This is very promising news.
Afternoon. Oh, it's fantastic. We're thrilled to hear this. I mean, obviously, we understood that she was going to begin a light schedule of engagements, and this certainly is happening. And to hear that she's actually going to work on one of the highlights of the royal calendar, it is wonderful. It's certainly a sort of slow and measured return. And obviously, we heard she had a meeting in Windsor. That was a sort of roundtable meeting to do with her early years last week. So to hear that she had another meeting is absolutely fabulous. Shows her determination, and sort of we're really willing her on as well. I mean, she wants to get completely well. And, you know, get back and work. That's her sort of ambition. And thinking that she's spent all that time as well, just planning. We're all excited about this concert. And it's the annual Together concert, I think that's what it's called. And just to remember, it's Westminster Abbey, and it's a really huge deal. She's hosted and worked on this for 4 years. And to remember, it's for sort of local charities. And we have celebrities there each year. So it's absolutely
It's been a staple,
fabulous.
hasn't it? It's become a staple to see Princess Catherine at this carol concert. It's very much a part of the festive calendar for, I'm sure, millions of people in this country and possibly around the world too. We're also looking out for her to be at the Remembrance commemorations too in November. I'm not sure if we've had that confirmed, but it's certainly speculated that she may well be there as well.
She will be. So November the 10th, yes, Remembrance Sunday. I'm pretty sure she'll be there supporting the royal family, veterans and their families. And then the following, obviously, month, it is the special concert. You know, I think she's really wanting to return to normality. What is normality for her? I mean, she has to take things day by day. But I do feel there'll be lots of little engagements that she will try and fit in if she feels well. I'm just trying to think. We've had Trooping of the Colour, Wimbledon, obviously the Cenotaph, the concert, but she continues to work on her early years projects as well. And I just, you know, just to remember that it's not going to be, I guess, as normal as previous. I think she will be working as hard as possible, but not to forget she's there, she's supporting the future King of England. She has a young family to look after, and she wants to make the most of that at this time. When she's Queen, in due course, there'll be many years of absolutely full-on work. But we're so excited to hear that she's working away at the concert. Can't wait to see it and see who's going to be there. It's always a fun time.
Starting to feel strangely festive already, and it's not even the end of September. I think the change in the weather has made it look forward to the Christmas. That will be certainly a highlight of the festive period. It always is quite magical, that concert. Thank you very much indeed, Helena Chard, the royal broadcaster. Great to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed. Well, that's it from me. Thank you very much indeed for watching Good Afternoon Britain and help make sense of that latest freebie that Sir Keir Starmer couldn't do without a nice stay in an £18 million penthouse paid for by a Labour donor. Don't go anywhere. Martin's going to pick up and we're going to have an exclusive interview with Keir Starmer, I believe, so stay tuned.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Cloudy and wet for many of us through the rest of today. The rain does clear from the south later on as this area of low pressure moves its rain bands north across the UK, clearing to showers in the southwest, whilst brighter skies remain for northern Scotland, albeit with here also a few showers. As we go into the evening, the main area of rain, though, moves through Wales into the Midlands and then eventually settles upon northern England, southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. A damp night to come in these areas, whilst showers push back into the south and southwest. Some heavy downpours overnight, along with a gusty wind. 12 to 13 Celsius by dawn in the south, so mild here, but rather chilly as we begin things for northern Scotland. A few showers, but otherwise bright enough for the far north of Scotland. Some sunshine around first thing. Caithness, Sutherland, Orkney, as well as the Western Isles seeing blue skies. But come further south into Central Belt, it's cloudy, it's damp. And the more persistent and heavier rain will be affecting Northern Ireland and most especially northeast England, where there is the risk of localised flooding, some transport disruption first thing, because of 50 to 80 millimetres of rain expected to accumulate through the day. That rain also continuing to affect North Wales, parts of the North Midlands. But for the southern half of England, as well as South Wales, well, there will be some brightness around, but also some heavy showers, perhaps even the odd rumble of thunder, and some gusty winds along the coast. Those winds, though, coming from the southwest will bring milder air, so where we avoid the showers, temperatures will reach 18 Celsius. Further north, a cold day to come, particularly under the rain across northern England. Then that rain continues into the evening. It does gradually sink south and it becomes heavier for a time through parts of mid Wales into the Midlands and East Anglia. That again could cause some issues. By Friday, the rain's clearing away and we'll see a mix of bright spells and showers. Saturday and Sunday also look brighter.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good luck. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
True crime is everywhere.
Yep, and next weekend, CrimeCon UK takes place in London. And joining us now to tell us more about that event and the true crime phenomena is former detective Stephen. How do you pronounce your surname? Keogh. Sorry, Stephen.
That's all right.
I should have checked you before.
No worries.
And Nancy, and again, Nancy, what's your surname?
Bourne.
Thank you. I'm showing my ignorance there, but thank you both for joining us. So, Stephen, you're a former top cop. Hope you don't mind me describing you as that. At CrimeCon and other events like that, do you get into sort of the semantics of the investigation